with a roll.
Sure. Let's see. Miss Jordan Byron,
Present.
Ms. Tabashnik,
Here.
Miss Wells,
Here.
Mr. Mushak,
Present.
Mr. Pachis,
Present.
Mr. Bryce,
Present.
Mr. Rowena,
Here.
Mr. Cantor,
Here.
Miss Langalis,
Here.
and Mr. Schulman.
Here. You
You have a quorum.
Okay, as I said, we're missing at the moment one member. As the most senior alternate, I'm going to seat Mr. Pachis. And we will, as necessary, rotate. If our missing commissioner is unable to make it, I'll appoint Anna as a second seat. And we will then rotate depending on the items and the votes, and give Mr. Bryce an opportunity to vote on these matters. So just remind the alternates again that whether you vote or not, you have a full opportunity to ask questions as any other member of the commission does. Our first item, Merit Station, Norwalk LLC, 67, 69, 79, 87, 111, 117, 129, 135, 155, 156, and 201 Glover Avenue and 2 Oakwood Avenue, North 7. Update on status. And I believe that Attorney Waters will be providing the update.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the record, David Waters, General Counsel to Building and Land Technology on behalf of the owners and applicants. Most of you, although there's some new faces, have known this project for about 2 years. We were involved in and were successful in working with you to get approved a master plan, which includes about 7 buildings, about 1,300 residential units, and some retail space on the west side of Glover Avenue. And part of that was an acknowledgement that following the master plan that we would come back to you for individual site plan review applications for each of the individual buildings themselves. And we are in the process of developing our plans for the first of those buildings. And we wanted to come to you and make sure that we were in alignment with where we were going. We've made a few changes which we think are consistent with the master plan, but wanted to make sure we weren't going off the beaten track. So with that, with no further ado, if I may, I'm going to share my screen.
David, while you're doing that, I just want to note that Darius Williams, the last member of the commission, has joined us as well.
So those present probably will remember that there were 3 phases originally agreed to as part of the master plan. The first phase is buildings starting from the south, building 1.1, building 1.2, and building 2.1. What we have done here is we've actually made it into a phase 1 prime, which is to take what was buildings 1.1 and 1.2 and make those into a single application. And originally, we had those as 2 separate buildings. If you follow my cursor, you had this building here that ran, this is Oakwood Avenue and Sear Hill that come up in this direction here. This is Glover Avenue running, south is to your left, north is to your right. Building 1.1 is the southernmost of the master plan buildings. It's 11 stories tall. The area that is striped here is 5 stories tall. There's a town square that is to be developed right across from the train station. and building 1.2, also 5 stories tall. What we did was we looked at that and we decided that the better way to handle all of this, and we'll explain why in a minute, was to combine those two buildings into a single building. And what you see up on top here is the original approval. And what you see below is our proposed development plan for this area, basically apples to apples in size. And what we've done is we've taken building 1.2 and combined it with building 1.1 so that you again have an 11-story building that is here, a 5-story building that is here, that is attached, and an 11-story addition to the 11-story building that is here to take up the other units that were over here. We end up with the same number of units essentially, where originally approved, it's 273 units. As proposed, it would be 266. It maintains the same 11-story and 5-story heights that we were talking about. What it does is a couple of interesting things. It allows us, among others, to take what was the town square located here that we agreed and was stipulated as a condition of approval would be at minimum of 90 by 90 or 8,100 square feet. We've actually been able to expand that. I know the commission had been interested in having a larger town square. And by doing what we've done, we're able to expand that so that the actual paved area that you see here is about 13,000 square feet instead of 8,100. And if you include the green area that's around it, it's actually about 18,000 square feet. And in addition, where building 1.2 was located, we now have some additional public open space park with a dog park located within it. And the dog park and the park area together is it's a little over a half an acre in size. The little brown thing that you see here is, you'll recall that we had proposed potentially a path to come down from Oakwood so that people that live up in that area would be able to come down and get to Glover Avenue. And we had it coming down and then following a rather circuitous route down to Glover Avenue. Instead, the way that we've reviewed this, the feasibility is we will be able to come straight down through and come through right into the town square, which is obviously desirable as a public gathering location. We're still working on the design, and we still need to address the private property rights that would be required in order to do it, but it is definitely feasible to do. The retail that is located here, what was retail in the old plan is all of the area that is under the stripe. Not necessarily all here, because there would still need to be some for building lobby and what have you, but everything else would be retail here and here. The retail is now located here, which is larger than the retail that was located in the original 1.1A, but obviously not as large as you would get with both together. What it does do, though, by having a larger length along Glover Avenue, is it means that you now have a better ability to have a front facade facing on Glover Avenue as well as on the town square. So you really end up with activating two sides of the retail box in order to be able to really bring the area into activity.
David, what is the difference in retail space from what's approved and what you're proposing?
Sure. So what we have here is about 7,100 square feet. Under this area here, if I've got it right, was about 5,300. And this was about 11,000 square feet, give or take, again, because that was a rough number without taking out lobby areas and things like that for this building. So the difference is roughly going from about 17,000 down to 7,000, something like that. Remember that there is retail in also not only in this building, but also in building 2.1, which is the one immediately to the north. And then there's retail again at 2.2 and 2.3, which are north of that as well. So we're not doing away with all of the retail by any means, but what we are doing is focusing it in specific locations that we think make the most sense.
From a retail perspective,
Yes.
is there a reason why you're doing it? Because this is a very large difference. You're eliminating more than half the retail.
In this particular two building phase, yes. In the entirety, not at all. It's maybe 20%, maybe 15% of the total retail that we're eliminating. But it is, again, we think making a better usable retail that is here because of the way that it can be configured. We are also, one of the discussion points that we had rather extensively about the town square was having a covered seating area. And what you'll see, and you'll see it a little bit later in a different guise, this area right here is a covered area outside of the building where seating is in front of the retail as well. So why the changes? It's really a question of activation. What we are really trying to do is activate this area as best we can and in the way that we think will enhance it the most. As we know from Stanford, and as we did in Harbor Point, we developed a town square, and on a Thursday afternoon in June when it's sunny out and warm, it's a lovely area and people congregate in it. By the same token, and on a Tuesday afternoon in February, nobody is there. And it's just a vacant and rather uninhabited and uninhabitable space. So the town square itself is a hard concept as a destination point for a lot of people. But what we do know, and again, from our experience in Harbor Point, is that everybody with dogs goes to the dog park. And it is a well-used feature of all of our developments, including the one at Glover Avenue. And people that would not necessarily go to a town square in February will go to the dog park 3 times a day, every day, in all seasons, in all weather, and they'll bring their dogs and they will be there, and it's a place where people congregate. So by creating this area, this park area with the dog park, it actually draws people into this area. And once they're in that area, if you've got the coffee shop and you want to get a cup of coffee or a slice of pizza or whatever it is, people will do that and they will congregate with their dogs and hang out in the town square area. So it actually not only activates the area, but it enhances the activation of the retail as well. And that we just—
David, is the dog park available to the public, or is it only for the residents?
That has not really been determined, Mr. Chairman. I mean, I think that frankly, having a dog park that we will have other ones, I'm assuming, as well as we move north, but how much it is used becomes an issue. And so if you open it to the public, then it becomes a question. On the other hand, as a practical matter, I'm not sure that there's a lot you can do short of putting in a code on a gate to be able to keep people out that are in the neighborhood if they wanted to use it for their dogs themselves. So we haven't determined our policy on it yet, but one of our concerns would be to avoid overuse.
The reason I asked the question is you're now going to have the connection
Sure.
from all those condos up above.
Yep.
And it would seem to me it would be very attractive if I were a dog owner living in one of those condos to come down and use the dog park.
No question. And again, that's one of the things, as I said, that we're not sure that we would necessarily disagree. And frankly, from the perspective of encouraging activation of the retail in the town square, it's not a bad thing to do. We just have to balance it against what the, an overuse of the dog park would do, because just too many people and too many dogs on a regular basis just creates a real mess, literally and figuratively. What we have, please, first of all, please ignore what you see here as on the architectural rendition as the streetscape, because we know that we have an obligation and an interest in creating a real streetscape along Glover Avenue with our nodes of interest that we've agreed upon, where those will all be developed as part of our overall site plan that will be part of our submission. What we really wanted to do was get some input from you guys today on the direction that we're going, and then we'll be able to add more color and flesh to what we're proposing. The other thing that I wanted to point out was the alignment to the train station. You'll see that we've drawn in here the train station. Right here is the connector where you can go across from Merit 7. And so this is kind of deemed the center of the train station, even though geometrically it's not. And you can see the platform to either side. What we're proposing to do, and you'll see in just a minute, there's a gateway arch that mimics the architecture of the train station, but it brings you across so that you're right across the street from Town Square and the retail that is right in front of it.
Attorney Waters, this is
Yeah.
Tammy. Would
Yes.
that retail space be just one store?
No, it would be highly unlikely that it would be just one. 7,000 square feet would be an awfully large store for the type of things that we're talking about here. What I suspect you would have is probably a coffee shop, a deli, maybe some third as well. But I don't see it as a single retail location at all. In fact, it probably cries to be at least 2 or 3.
Thank you.
This is a rendering prepared by the architects. Again, please ignore the streetscape. It's not going to be this barren and uninteresting when it is done. But what we did want to show you was, again, the interrelationship between the building and the train station, and to show you how the improvements are located. Over here on your left, you see the train station, that center area where it crosses across from Merit 7. You can see here in the foreground, in the center, the mimic of the gateway and the architecture. You can see here, this is the covered area that is in front of the retail, and you can see retail that it runs along the town square as well as along Glover Avenue. And-
David, how deep is that covered area?
I believe it's about 15 feet, Mr. Chairman. I will confirm that, and that will all be clearly laid out on the plans.
Thank you.
You can see again, this is a 5-story building, and with the 11 stories over here, you can see green on the roof, as we've all agreed, and activation of the town square itself. Viewing it from a slightly higher angle, you can again see the relationship between Merit 7 over here, and this is the crossing over to get down to the train station. Crossing the street, the gateway that mimics again the architecture of the train station, and then the layout of the retail, town square, and moving on to the park, which would be off to your right. And that's kind of where we've gotten to at this point. And we, again, just thought that it would be helpful to get some feedback from you, because it's not exactly as we had proposed. We've combined a couple of buildings, but we think that it is consistent with the master plan, both in the bulk of the buildings and in the intensity of use as far as density of residential units and what have you. But again, we want your thoughts. One other thing that I'll add, just because we can see it more from this location than any other, we will be also making an application for a text amendment, even though we thought we were completely done with those after 2 years of working with you. And the reason for that is because in the executive office zone, the front setback is measured off of the center line of the street, which is not a problem. It just is what it is. However, in this particular case, with the improvements that are being made on Glover Avenue by DOT, the center line of the street is moving. And it changes all over the place. And so for us, it's problematic because what may be conforming today may be non-conforming a week from now or 2 months from now, or it might go the other direction. And so it's kind of a moving target. So what we are proposing is that under the master plan, we would measure the front setback off of the property line rather than off of the center line. We would still use the same measurements based upon what has historically been the center line to measure property line to setback as well. So it's not like we're trying to get anything better than what we already had based upon the original center line of the street. We just want to make sure that it's a static target and not a moving target that we have to meet as we go through the approval process.
Attorney Waters, is this a placeholder architecture of the buildings, or is this starting to get close to what you think the buildings are going to look like?
It's moving in that direction, but as we know, everything that we do, both with the streetscape and with the architecture, is going to be referred to your consultant. And, you know, again, we want to just be able to get to a point where we know what we're doing in our design work so that we can then move forward and get it to your staff so that they can get it to your consultant, and then hopefully we can get it to you.
Thank you.
Attorney
David,
Waters.
well, go ahead, please.
Oh, sorry, Lou. Attorney Waters, you mentioned that the town square material was going to be blacktop.
No, I did not.
Okay,
No.
What is it?
I believe it will be pavers. That seems to make the most sense, and it allows for some pervious nature to it, but it also allows for use with all sorts of kinds of events and high traffic as well.
okay. Now, would there be any type of greenery in the middle of it? I know this is just a drawing, but.
Yeah, this is just the drawing. We have not gotten to the point of design. Obviously, what we want to do is be able to create some flexibility with it so that it can be used for events like, you know, a farmer's market and things like that. But we also want to be able to have it so that, yes, it's not just a pavement area that is 13,000 square feet in size either. So
Okay.
yes, it is to be developed as part of the, we recognize that the things that the commission is probably the most interested in are the architecture, the streetscape along the street, and the treatment of town square.
Sure, and a couple more questions. In swapping out building 1.2 and putting that T off the back of the main building, what's the impact to the people that are living in those condominiums behind? 11 stories is rather tall compared to what they are. Do you have
Sure.
a sideways drawing of that?
We don't have a drawing of it, but I think that, and obviously we can and will provide to you the perspectives and sections if you wish. But let me just point out how this is probably the easiest one to take, because this shows the superimposed existing conditions that are here. If you're over on the other side of Sear Hill Road in the condos that are over here, what you're seeing is, yes, here's the 11-story addition, but it's all attached to an 11-story building so that your view is still of the 11 stories. It really doesn't change. Similarly, if you're in the condos that are over here, and again, we kind of were able to do this with some intention as to where the distances would be, the same thing is true, that if you saw, yes, you now see an 11-story building that is in this location, but if it wasn't there, you would see the 11-story building in this location. So it hasn't really changed significantly the impact. The 5 stories that are here, which is the parking area, the parking garage with the pool and amenity deck on top of it, is exactly the same as the impact you would have gotten from the 5 stories that was proposed originally. So there really is very little change in impact from what was originally approved.
Well, it's closer to the property line for the people on Oakwood, most definitely. And then the parking garage and pool deck is 5 stories, so it's the same height as the residential 5-story building.
Yes, but that was what was already approved. This
Right,
parking
and those-
garage, the 5-story garage was already approved as part of the master plan.
And the tenants in the building 1.1 use that garage?
Yes,
Okay, thank you.
David, can you go to that next slide for a moment?
this one? Or
No.
the perspectives?
The architectural.
Mhm.
Yeah, okay. And that one.
Yep.
Clearly, that doesn't represent what's going on behind the building. So
It does not. Agreed.
I think it is important for us to see that.
Okay,
Not number one, when you give us the presentation.
of course.
I'm only speaking for myself. I can't speak for the commission as a whole.
Mhm.
I personally do not have a problem with combining the buildings in the way you suggest. But I think if you do that, you should try and do it in a way so that it doesn't look like a single block, the way what you have up there does. And I also think you might consider taking at least some small portion of the park and expanding or finding some better way to meld the public space with the park. I'm not sure that's enough space, for example, if you were choosing to do a market, you may need additional space, and if the space can serve both purposes, or more of the space can serve both purposes, that might be valuable.
Yeah, I think, Mr. Chairman, I think that one of the things I would just say about that is that the idea of creating this green space of park here is actually just to do that it means that, like, for a farmer's market, you could actually have people with their tents and their tables that are out in the park area as well. It's not meant to be a Berlin Wall between the town square and the park. In fact, it's meant to be a kind of a spillover area, and that will all be developed as part of the landscaping plans.
Okay, and I assume, since you're showing this to us now, that it is your preference to present this and have us approve the architectural, both the changes in the architectural renderings approved under the current zoning rather than under the new zoning?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I mean, our timetable is such that we're very anxious to actually get started. And so we would prefer to proceed under the existing zoning and hopefully be able to get approvals relatively quickly so that we can get into the ground.
Yeah, I don't think here, frankly, that the difference between the new zoning, at least as it currently stands,
Yeah,
and the current zoning is all that different. But I understand what you're saying. Just make sure you give us enough time to have it reviewed by our architectural consultant.
yes, by all means.
Other questions from the commissioners?
Mike here. Hi. I don't have a question. I just want to comment on the open space. I think that it's a huge improvement, and it's certainly going to look better from the train station. You're going to look out and see this big green space from the stair tower, which is going to have a lot of foot traffic, instead of more building on the other side of the town square. I think this is a huge improvement. I don't mind the reduction of retail either, because I always felt, and I think this was all part of our approval was that we're creating a larger mixed-use district here by encompassing the existing retail on Main Avenue. There will be mixed use here, but now that it's easily accessible by just going either an elevator or stairway up and crossing over, it's like a 2-minute walk probably to get over to the retail on Main Avenue now. That I think that just presents less chance of empty retail space, which is which is an ongoing issue with a lot of the retail that's being built. It's just harder to fill. So I think that you have more guarantee that you're going to fill the retail here, and the fact that you have retail in the other buildings in this master plan. So I don't see any minuses. I see all pluses for this. And I agree the building impact on neighbors. Don't forget Oakwood Avenue really rises quickly. And a section through the middle showing the grade changes would be very helpful with the existing condo complexes up above, because it's a considerable height difference. So I think the impact of the height is not as like, for instance, the garage entry on Oakwood Avenue, doesn't that enter probably on the 3rd level, I would imagine?
It does. Yeah.
Yeah, so that like goes into the side of the 5-story building, not at grade at the bottom. So anyway, I'm just giving my opinion. Didn't really have any questions, but I think that this is it looks to me from a landscape architect's point of view, this is just going to create a much more attractive town square and centerpiece.
David, can you report on the status of the walkway between Glover and Main Avenue?
Yes, we've been working on the design of that. And in fact, I believe that there is a meeting with your staff that's being, or not your staff, but with Public Works staff and TMP that is being worked on as we speak. We're also working with DOT on that, but that is definitely still being pursued. We've been working, we've had our professional consultants working on the feasibility of it. It certainly is feasible, and we just need to get all of the parties aligned on it. But we are proceeding, and we recognize, if you remember, that one of the conditions that you imposed on us was that prior to the application for the first phase, we must have made an application, and the plans have to have been reviewed by both the municipality as well as DOT for that sidewalk to be installed. So we're well aware of that.
Okay, good. Any other questions? All right, if not,
Thank you for your feedback.
thank you very much.
And we will be in touch.
We'll look forward to it. All right, let's move on to our second item, site plan review 2023-21. Ham, Scott Herman, 289 East Avenue, construction of new flood compliant single-family residence with an integral garage porch, deck, and associated stormwater management system on a vacant lot.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Scott Herman, I'm the owner and applicant of this property at 289 East Avenue. It is District 3, Block 42, Lot 33, Zone C residence, which is single and multifamily homes. So I'll share my screen. I have a presentation here. Allow Zoom to share your screen. Can anybody help me with this? I'm looking to do a PowerPoint.
You have your PowerPoint open, Scott?
My PowerPoint was open, yeah, but
So when you click share
Oh,
screen,
okay,
it
yeah,
should give you the option to select that.
So that's great.
sorry about this, guys. I just have to do some passwords. Okay, is that Brian talking? So I got Microsoft PowerPoint here and I can't open it. I could go, let me see if it'll, can I get to my desktop?
Yeah, generally, if you're trying to share your screen and show presentation, which you'll have like the PowerPoint open on your end, then you'll
It
click
was.
share screen at the bottom of Zoom, and that'll open like all the windows you have open on your PC, and you'll be able to just like select your PowerPoint and share. So like you'd come back into the Zoom meeting, you should be able to click share screen at the bottom. And then it should open up a window where you'll see everything that you have open. And then you can click your PowerPoint. If not, we can try just like sharing the site plan and architectural, and you can just kind of walk the commission through it.
Yeah, why don't we open that up, because it's not, I'm not even seeing the Zoom anymore.
Okay.
Amelia, can you help me with that? If you go to the aerial,
Yep. Okay. So aerial photo first.
yeah.
All right.
Okay, so I'll orient you here. This is the property here, this little square. This is East Avenue coming down. This is the finger of the Norwalk Harbor, east side. And there's a culvert running down here. There's two 10-inch pipes that feed the mill pond. So this is the entirety of the mill pond. It's cut off at the top, but that is tidal. Thank you. That takes high tide comes in, fills the mill pond, high tide, low tide goes out, drains the mill pond to some extent. And with regards to this property, there is a old seawall here, and that goes up and down with the tides, but it does not breach unless there would be a catastrophic flood.
What is the elevation of that seawall?
The seawall is about 3-ish feet. It varies. There's a coastal jurisdiction line, which I'll show you later on the drawings, that zigzags just beyond the seawall. And just important point is this tidal mill pond is the only sensitive coastal resource identified near this property. So there's no wetland soils or water courses that would bring in wetland soils. So the most important issue here is going to be protecting the mill pond. So I guess, since I don't have the renderings, could you go to the architectural drawings A1? The problem here is it's going to be sideways.
We should be able to rotate it when it loads.
That's great.
And get you fiber update, Amelia.
Yeah, definitely.
Excuse me, while we're waiting, Mr. Herman, can you just tell us, was there ever a structure on this parcel before?
Yeah, so the history is there's a house, and the neighbor to the right owned both as one single property, and there was a subdivision done in 2011.
Mhm.
That's on the file there. It was a special permit was granted to subdivide, and so that property has just been vacant, undeveloped property by history. So there weren't any structures, there weren't any. So if you go to the very first page, A0. Okay, so yeah, so this is what I was going to bring up on my power. So this is a rendering of the proposed house. It's 2.5 stories. There's 2 living stories, this level, and then an attic, and an attached garage, which is small, and then a front parking area. The first 2 levels are going to be the only finished levels, and then the attic itself is part of the envelope, because this is going to be a passive rated house. So the idea here is to get it at net zero. And the way you do that is you build a very tight envelope with very specific assembly systems and windows, and then you don't lose much air. So you can heat your house with low energy and cool your house with low energy, and then your solar panels will provide the energy needed. So you will not be dependent on the grid other than when it's dark, but the net out will be zero and possibly even positive if this house is built properly.
That's awesome.
Attic, I'm sorry?
I was saying that's awesome.
Oh, good. So the attic is going to be coupled and conditioned with the house, and that's going to house all of the mechanicals, because we're in the flood zone. We can't do anything down in the lower level. And that means it's going to be an all electric run house. So there won't be any fossil fuel systems. And that gets back to the net zero and the energy benefit. I'll take you to the rear, which is here. This is important because this is the flood zone. So this is sort of a rendering of the seawall. It doesn't look this good. This is the back of the house. It's essentially the backyard is the flood zone, and that's AE 14. The first level will be sitting at 17.5, so 3.5 above the base flood, and that's 2.5 feet higher than required. Then the garage is a little bit lower here. That'll be at 17. And the heat pumps that'll run the house will be on a platform over here. You can see this little pop out. There'll be a platform over here with 2 heat pumps that will sit high and dry at 17. And then this deck here, the deck is a little different than what you see. It's not straight, it actually curves. And that's because we had to comply with the coastal jurisdiction line. And so we ended up keeping it inside, and we were able to make it a little bigger, so you might be able to sit out here rather than just come out and head down. It's also important that we have a deck here because it's the only access to the lower level from the finished space. This side here is the south. So that shows you where the solar panels will be. So this roof plane will be southeast, this roof plane will be southwest, and the garage is southwest. So those will house the solar panels, and they won't be visible from the road, which is it's just luck. Here you also see, this is another important issue with the drainage, which I'll get into later. This will be a retained structure here and here for the parking area and for the garage. So it's important that we drain this properly, and we can't have an impervious area here because you get water into your structure and that could break up the structure. So that would be damaging. It wouldn't be wise from an engineering perspective. Okay, so let's go to the site plan page, first page. Yeah, okay, so this is a busy slide, it's small. So I'll try to explain the drainage. So the whole property will be drained by way of infiltration galleries. So there's one over here on the left, and then there's 2 over here. This driveway will be drained sidelong to these 2 catch basins and then pipe down and into this infiltration gallery. Well, it'll just drain to the earth and by gravity, so down to the water table. The downspouts for the roof are in various spots here, 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 and they'll pipe down to the 2 drainage galleries over on the right. And because of these drainage galleries, there's a little bit of a challenge with the landscaping. So I'll finish with that. Oh, by the way, this is the coastal jurisdiction line. It's very zigzaggy. I think that's set at 5 feet 4 inches. So we got challenged here with the deck. We had to keep it inside the line. Any questions yet? I'm going to finish off with the landscaping plan and then I'll take questions. Okay, the planting plan. So this is a challenge because there's not a lot of room. You have, this is the upper level, this is street level, East Avenue, and this would be essentially the front yard. So the idea here was to do Ilex winterberry. It's a plant that I know a lot about and I like. Here I got a tree in, but it has to be a small tree because of the utility lines running across and you don't want to block your solar panel. So you can't go big here, but I chose witch hazel there. Here's where we were able to get a couple of trees in. I had actually asked for thuja and they put down serviceberry and thuja. So if you saw that and was wondering why it's not clear to me either, but I think both are good choices. Down in the lower level on the right would be a viburnum hedge. And then for our buffer for the seawall and the tidal pond, this was chosen as chokeberry. Here, that is a shrub that adapted in salt marshes. So it's salt tolerant and it would be a good choice. I actually had wanted a lot more of it. I had wanted double staggered and across, but I was told that you can't mess with this line, the coastal jurisdiction line. And then the rest of it would be a grass mix, salt tolerant native grass mix. So the idea there is to buffer as best you can. I would propose that wherever there's dirt, I'll put plants. And that's basically the whole project.
Amelia,
Mhm.
comments on this?
This is probably a can that we'd want to be a little more concerned about because it is a vacant lot. It's not like redeveloping a house. So obviously there's an increase in coverage and a decrease in vegetation just because we're putting a structure where there wasn't one before. But it is a very, very small lot. So the house appears big in comparison to the size of the lot. But if you go out to the site, you can see it's tiny and there's quite a large slope too. So I like that we have hay bales along with the silt fence to protect the mill pond. And Scott, I think if you want to plant more, even within that coastal jurisdiction line and going over it, that is totally fine. The more plants, the better. Speaking of buffers for any wetlands, tidal or inland.
Yeah, wherever there's dirt, I'll put a plant.
Questions from the commission?
Mike here.
Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, I would encourage as much planting there because the view that you showed in the rendering, of the first level, the lowest level, it seemed a little stark because it didn't have any landscaping in it. Also showed the blank. We don't have architectural review here, so I'm skirting that a little bit. And I was a little concerned about the windowless garage facade, sort of facing Mill Pond Park. And but that was in the rendering, and the rendering didn't actually show the building next door, which is shown in this plan that's up right now. And you can see the building line of the existing residence next door, and that's actually going to shield the view that you showed in your rendering for the most part from the more public areas down on Seaview Avenue. So but definitely more planting on the downhill side. And yeah, I could see your constraints here. You don't really have a lot of places.
Yeah, the problem is these galleries. I was told by the land tech team you put a big tree in and then the roots push up against your galleries and can really
Yeah.
crack 'em. So.
There's
I mean,
there's
I love-
even a distance away from it they prefer. I'm not sure if it's 5 or 10 feet, but
Yes, absolutely. And of course, you can plant the superficial stuff, so it will be green if I get a chance.
yeah, that's all I had.
Anything else from any of the other commissioners? Okay, Amelia, we have a document on this to either
Yes.
approve or deny
s-
the,
Is the
Yeah.
resolution up on the screen?
no, it's not.
Okay, all right, let me.
You have to unshare and reshare, Amelia.
All right, there we go. I have too many windows open. Okay,
There you go.
Okay. All right, can I have a motion on this?
Move to approve it.
Okay, Hector has moved approval. Is there a second?
I'll second Lou, Tammy.
Okay, Tammy seconds. You can't do a raise of hands right now this way. Let's do a roll call.
can I just clarify are any of the alternates sitting, or is it all the regular commission members who are voting on this application?
The only alternate that is sitting for this one is Mr. Patches.
Awesome, thank you. Okay, so we can start with Ms. Jordan Byron,
Yes.
Mr. Williams,
Yes.
Ms. Langalis,
Yes.
Mr. Cantor,
Yes.
Ms. Wells,
Yes.
Mr. Patches,
Yes.
Mr. Mishak,
Yes.
Mr. Rowena,
Yes.
and Mr. Schulman.
Yes. That sounds unanimous. All right, let's move on to the next item. But before we do, Mr. Patches, I'm going to, since this will also require a vote, unseat you and seat Ms. Tabachnik in your place this time.
Sure thing.
Okay. And then on the next one, we'll do the same with Mr. Chapin. Okay, this is 2023-27 SP modification Zion Properties LLC, 512 to 528 Main Avenue, modification to special permit number 10-20 SP for Garavelle Subaru car dealership. And who is representing Garavelle?
Good evening. It's Andy Sumalides, Principal and Professional Engineer with Lantec. Scott did a good job with our plan on the last one. Guess he didn't need us.
Thanks a lot. We went back and forth a lot.
Let me share my screen. Some of you guys might be familiar with it. We did a special permit at 512, 516, and 520 Main Ave, right next to the DMV. Just to get you guys oriented, the DMV is right here. I got this aerial which shows it under construction. Here's the new Garavelle Subaru dealership. This front portion here is a two-story, only the two-story portion of the structure. You drive up here on the north side of the building, there's a ramp that gets you up. And actually the back part of that is a parking deck for employees and additional car storage. The balance of this site is car storage. So if you guys have driven by it recently, you guys would see what's going on there. During construction, it was challenging to get some landscaping in particular along the eastern and northern border. The original plan called for terracing of retaining walls. There's a big grade change that goes from west to east on this property and up to the residential properties. I would say it's about 20+ feet in grade change just along the back 10 feet here. And you'll see it in some of the photos later on. So during construction, what we encountered was a lot of ledge outcropping. When we first examined this, we saw the DMV had a concrete retaining wall here. Some of the other adjacent properties here had, fairly large concrete retaining walls. So that kind of dictated the design originally. But during construction, we did some borings and realized there's ledge very shallow, about 2 feet down. So that limited, so that kind of changed. We pivoted from a retaining wall design to a rock cut along the eastern boundary there. And that limited also what we could do for landscaping along that eastern boundary. So what we did was, and I'll show you what the landscaping plan was as part of the approval. Here again, you see that dealership building. This is the 2-story element, that ramp again, as I mentioned, to the parking area. These plantings here highlighted in green were basically not constructible to plant, to be able to plant these trees. It's just not feasible. So what we did was we originally had just a plain chain link fence along that boundary. We had pivoted to a chain link fence with privacy slats to provide some additional screening. We then reached out to the adjacent property owners, the residential property owners, and walked their properties numerous times to see what else we could do on their properties to provide some additional screening. So one property in particular, the one basically directly behind the building, we were able to put 12 8-foot tall arborvitaes, as well as a stockade fence, which you'll see in the photos. We were able to get some photos from her property looking out and as well as looking up. On the other 2 properties, they're already pretty densely vegetated. So in order to further plant on those properties, we would have to take down what's there. So what we did was just leave it as is. So what I'll show you now is we took some photos standing here looking up. So the first 2 photos you'll see is looking up in this direction into the northeast corner and southeast corner. Then we took a shot here. The third photo you'll see is looking right down this line. And you'll see a good shot of what I'm talking about with the rock outcropping and no potential for landscaping. And then I took some photos down here looking up. These photos were actually taken from this morning. And then a couple photos here from one of the residential properties just to show what we've done on her property. So again, this is that photo looking from that upper parking deck back to that northeast corner. You can see here is that stockade fence. And on the other side of that stockade fence, you'll see in later photos, the arborvitaes that were planted to provide some additional screening. Here's looking, and you can see some of the dense vegetation that occurs here. You obviously see the rock cut that occurred on the back portion of these lots and how shallow the rock is from the existing vegetation or topsoil that just made planting not feasible. And here's that shot looking south down that line. Here's that parking storage area, and you can see all the rock outcropping and the rock slope. And here's that black chain link fence with privacy slats, and obviously you can see that some of that dense vegetation that would need to come out to replant. Here's a shot in that parking car storage area looking up. You see that black vinyl fence with that privacy slats again, and obviously all that dense vegetation and obviously the rock cut in front of that. And here's just a few angles of it looking in all directions. And here is that property I told you about, the neighboring property. And here you see the stockade fence being built with these arborvitaes. And here's actually a better shot of stockade fence being completely, so you could kind of see, you could see a portion of that two-story building in the front of it, just, just beyond here. And then once construction of that fence and the arborvitae's are fully done here and planted, you don't see that structure anymore. It completely screens it. And that is what I have as a presentation. So basically we're looking for is a modification in order for us to proceed with basically getting our CO. We did reach out to staff. I do want to mention, we did reach out to staff during construction and brought to their attention the switching from a retaining wall design to a rock cut and the inability to do some of those plantings on that eastern border. They did mention to reach out to the neighbors, go play nice with the neighbors. And I think we've accomplished that. And here we are now looking for relief on or a modification to our planting plan, just because it's not feasible in most instances. And so we can move forward with our CO. Happy to answer any questions.
I have a
Mike.
question, Mike here.
Go ahead.
Hi, by the way, when you were showing the trees, those were Norway spruce, but the arborvitae's were to the left. They were combination. So just for the record, I thought those were really fat arborvitae's. But did anybody look at sightlines with the comparing the fence, the chain link fence before and after the slats? Because I don't like the way the fence looks on that hill with a more solid presence. It's just really visible. And before the slats went in, you would see the rocks behind it, but you wouldn't see anything else. You wouldn't, like, it just seemed like it didn't really do anything for the neighbors above to put those slats in on that fence. And it looks like an attempt was made, but is it even needed now that you've done the fence and the greenery above? Because I would prefer to have this is going to be crazy, but
To take it out.
I'm sure Mr. Garavel is going to be, his head would explode, but I would say take the slats out of the fence, because it would be better to have a pretty transparent fence there so that you could actually see the greenery behind it and not have this black. It's really like an artwork. I mean, to be generous, but to be not generous, it's just this black stripe across the hill. And I don't mind the rock hill. I think that's kind of dramatic. We all freaked out when Walgreens blasted the hill across from the Sono collection, but that was 15 years ago. And there was a big giant cliff, and it's since been softened with just plants that just come in and wildflowers and stuff just grow. But it ended up not being as bad as we all thought it was. But in any case, so I'm digressing. But the question is, do you need those slats now?
Yeah, we could certainly look at taking them out. I think it may help in the winter months when some of that foliage isn't there in the background. It may provide some screening there. But we can, if you guys want them out, I'm sure Mr. Garavel wouldn't mind taking them out.
Well, the angle, it's like really stuck. The fence is really stuck up against the steep hill, but in the middle of the hill.
Right.
So it seems like the only sight line that it would improve would be if somebody walked to the edge of their property.
Right.
And they were standing really at the edge of their property looking down, but from their home and from most of this, I'm going to imagine a deck or whatever they have behind their house, that
You're looking over it.
It's just because you're looking over it. Exactly.
Right.
So
to
me, it would, and then another question is the 8 or 9 trees that you didn't plant out in the parking lot shown on the plan in green. The orange ones were shown as planted. Right. What explains the deletion of those trees?
To be able to showcase the cars for sale. We wanted to minimize vegetation along the frontage. Just don't provide screening to showcase the cars. Obviously it's a car dealership and the cars want to be visible when driving by. So that was the reason for a couple of the less trees in the front.
Yeah, well, two of them right up against the facade of the building. They were pairs that would soften the building.
Mhm.
That was the intent of the original plan. I don't know who did you guys do the original planting plan?
We did.
Yeah, so.
Yeah.
And then the street trees were required with the approval, I'm sure. So you've eliminated how many, can we go back to
Yeah,
that?
Cap, I'll pull that back up.
Yeah, thanks. There's
So there's three
three
street
street
trees,
trees. Yeah,
correct, that were limited. Obviously, these aren't as is, they're evenly spaced. As they stand today, so if you go to the as-built. Or, we didn't do the as-built, but you could see the trees are this symbol here. So they're
Got it.
evenly spaced, they're about 60 feet on center. And here you go, they're evenly spaced along this frontage as well.
do you know what those are by any chance?
Good
I'm just
question. I
wondering
can,
just for size. The-
yeah, I can get back to you with an answer on that. I do have. I think receipts on what they planted.
Well, I think I've bought 5 Subarus from Garavelle, but I know that he cut down those trees on the old location to park cars and, or they died, but I think they died from compaction. And so, and they've never been replanted, right? So the old site, I don't think you own the old site. I think that was rented, isn't that correct?
Correct.
Leased or whatever.
Yeah, it was leased.
I mean, I'd love for staff to go back and insist somehow that the trees get put back on the old site because it's right at the exit ramp. And, you're looking at a building and it just became parking for cars. And that site was so constrained, it was ridiculous, right? I mean,
Right.
you
Yeah,
can see-
that was a different scenario, I think, of why he was trying to
Yeah.
get those cars parked up there and see, this site doesn't warrant that, doesn't need it, right? So,
Well, I could see spreading out the street trees if they were the right variety, and as long as, they're in the rhythm, and if they're gonna get big enough, but I don't know what they were. I didn't go over there and look. I've just, in fact, I tried to do a Google Earth street view and I got all the old businesses that were knocked down before
Right.
it was put in. So I just didn't have a chance to drive up there, but
yeah,
the
I'll
other two-
find it. It's
the other
probably
two
buried in my
trees-
emails, but I'll get
Yeah.
that email.
okay. And then there's an island. If you go back, if you just flip back to the plan, you can see the 2 trees by the building, the 2
These
green.
two were not planted, and then these two in the island.
Yeah, I don't see a reason why those shouldn't be planted. I mean, this is this holding up your CO as well? It's the first issue and then the second issue, I guess, right? I mean,
Yeah, correct.
Are we here to
it's a
say it was
complete-
okay to do 3 less street trees? Imagine because you're not following the original plan? Is that's, I guess that's a question for staff.
Right.
Yeah, so when when Garavelle came in originally and got the site approved through the commission, part of that approval was the landscape plan. So, if they're not able to plant certain plantings, and they want to make modifications to that, they need to come back to you, the commission, in order to approve the modifications that they're requesting. I mean, in this request, I mean, my reading of it was you were just looking at the plantings along the rear of the property, along that the rock outcropping, and the neighbors on creeping hemlock. I did not read this as approving eliminating the trees that are located throughout the site, like the street trees or the trees along the building.
Does that mean that, are you saying that you would still require that for site plan, for a CO?
Right. Yeah.
Well, if they've spaced out the trees now to a new rhythm or new, like a new spacing, and they've got 3 less trees, I'd want to go look at it probably, but I'd be open to that as long as they put in the other 4. Have they paved those islands, or have those, what's going on with those islands right
So
now?
these islands are gravel.
Okay.
I'm not too sure about these two. I'd have to double check. These might be paved islands now.
Well, I think it would be an improvement and All right, so I'm gonna get personal here for a minute. I go to the Philadelphia Flower Show every year, and Subaru is their main sponsor, and it's all about green. And they've got this big green centerpiece in the flower show, and push the whole green element of Subaru. So I'm gonna say that I would recommend putting those 4 trees in. The street trees leave open, but the back is fine. I think that's a no-brainer. I would just
Mike?
love to see the black slats taken out.
Mike, let's pull up the resolution and see if we can address those issues of concern to you in the resolution.
Yeah, because I think
Okay.
the Garabelle would find that those trees are going to add to the
These 4.
building's appearance. Yeah, those 4.
Okay,
Lou, could
All
I
right.
comment before we pull up the resolution, please?
Sure, go ahead.
Thank you. Oh, hi, Mr. Sumalides.
Hi.
In the back, I agree with Commissioner Mushak that black fence just looks pretty horrible and out of place. I'm wondering, is there any soil available to plant something, not that's going to grow up like a tree, but down over that rock wall like an ivy, so it would kind of give it a little bit more placement and end up looking a little bit more natural? And anywhere you can do it along that rock wall might be nice.
yeah, we could probably look at that for sure.
Okay, and I agree with putting as many trees on the property as possible. We know you want to showcase the cars, but when people are out there looking, it might be nice for them to have a shady place to stand.
I would also suggest that before you remove that screening that's in the fencing, that you speak with the neighbors.
Right,
Because the whole purpose here was to find an alternate to what you were going to do. And this
Correct.
was the alternate you came up with. Particularly the neighbors that don't have the plantings and the fence. It seems to me they should be on board with that.
Or even if it was half as tall, that's what, a 5 foot, even if it was just a lower fence, if you needed it.
so I have the species here, Mike. Bradford pear, Kwanzaa cherry, red maple, October glory.
Oh, so the
It's a
October
mix.
glories are probably the ones out on the street, because
Yeah,
the city actually doesn't allow Bradford pears as street trees. It's on a forbidden list. I don't know if that ever got over to P and Z, but I think it did. But there's improved varieties of Bradford pear that don't have the problems that the old Bradford pears had. But anyway, those were the 2 up against the building, and I don't know what I just saw the plant list
right.
when I was looking at the submitted materials. I
Yeah,
saw
I think the
original
Bradford pear
plans.
actually were the approved trees along the street.
the what, the Bradford pears.
Yeah,
Oh, how funny. Well, anyway, so
so that was
That's-
the mix. That was the makeup of all those street trees and landscaped island trees.
yeah, I was gonna say the pears on the plan, I saw 2 pears up against the building. And if it's October glories along the street, that would be great, because that those would get much bigger.
Right.
And turn into real shade trees. And eventually you prune under them.
Right.
I always tell people to go look at Kohl's on Connecticut Avenue to see what street trees don't block views of retail or signage or anything, because they've been allowed to grow up, and you look under them and you could see the whole parking lot. And when you start pruning them, you create like lollipops that block the view of the sign. So it's counterproductive for property owners to start pruning the street trees that we recommend, but it's a big problem
Right.
for us, because people are always concerned about views in. So I think, I don't know, Lou, what do you think at this point?
Let's go to the resolution.
All right.
And see if we can address these issues that way.
Yeah, so this resolution is pretty light since we're
Right.
sort of
exactly.
anticipating limited sort of like just a motion to approve or deny. So let's pull up.
Well, I applaud the effort to talk to the neighbors. That actually is a great thing that happened.
Okay,
And you can definitely see this effect of the screening from above with the photo you took from above.
Mike? You want to make a suggestion regarding the 4 additional trees that have not yet been provided?
Well, it's really 6 though. I don't know why we're giving away those front 2 as like the plan said for the volume of trees. I think they should plant the volume of trees.
Nick,
Right.
well, I don't disagree with you. If they've already placed spaced the trees, I'm not sure that you won't break up the rhythm of the front of the building by putting in 2 trees that are not properly spaced.
That feels a little backwards, Lou, in the sense of like it's like someone asking for forgiveness versus permission here. Like
Yep.
effectively, we lost 2 trees. Now there's all talks constantly of tree coverage and not enough, and you know how do we add to that? I know 2 is not the end of the world, but like it feels a little bit cheap just to like give it away for free. And I don't know if there's any alternative to do. And maybe it's not planting them here. Maybe there's something to the Tree Alliance that could be, you know, a fee in lieu of the 2 trees. I don't know what the solutions are here.
Well, I'll make a suggestion. I know where you're coming from, Nick, and I you know, it's just a surprise, but I'm willing to leave the street trees as they are. There's 3 actually, not 2 street trees that were not put in, and just require that they be planted somewhere on the site. Even if, you know, putting trees up in front of that in the back, if they could fit at the base of that wall, would grow up and soften it. And to Tammy's point, it's such a challenge to get anything to grow up there. Believe it or not, things will come in but on their own. A lot of them will be invasive and not native, but it's just so hard to get things to grow in a condition like that with thin soil facing west. So the hot afternoon sun bakes down on it. You know, there'd have to be irrigation, et cetera. I think just letting nature take over that hill is probably the best strategy.
Well, then let's
but
concentrate on developing language here.
Yeah, I would say
Addresses those issues. I mean,
I would say that the original number of trees approved need to be planted somewhere on site.
Well, why don't we insist that the 4 trees
The 4 trees
that have not yet been planted be planted where we were told they were going to be planted?
Yes,
If the 2 in the front are not, and I'm not, you know, I don't know why they weren't planted along the front.
Well, they said, Nick, that it's going to block the view of their vehicles.
No, I'm sorry. No, this is Andy. I'm sorry. The 2
Oh,
little
I'm sorry. I apologize.
the 2 little landscaped islands in front of the building. I don't know if that's a, you know, Subaru corporate thing or what have you. Because I've seen that before on some other dealerships we've worked on, where we do some of this landscaping along the building and they inevitably never put them in. But they never, you know, it never was told to us that it can't be put in. So if those 2 can't go there either, can we relocate those on site somewhere?
yeah.
Okay.
We're not gonna deny a CO because of 2
Right.
trees, but
Right.
I definitely see the principle here of
Right. I got you.
of requiring these trees be planted, and it fits in with the whole Subaru
Mantra.
marketing plan of being green. And I'm not saying anything, trust me, about Garavelle. They've been like the best car dealer I've ever dealt with. So, but
Okay.
I think they need to plant the trees that were approved.
All right, so go ahead. Let's move this along.
They hate me right now because my current Subaru has 120,000 miles, and I'm not planning on getting a new one anytime soon. But it's my 5th Forester I got there.
So far, that looks fine. Is there anything else?
No. Oh, the black fence, if the black is not required by the neighbors above, that the black slats be taken out. Oh, the poor person that stood up on that hill and put those in is gonna go up and take them out now, but it really is a jarring visual.
Just to clarify point one, we're just talking about not the arborvitae or the screen trees
No,
along the
no.
boundary, right?
No.
Obviously, so,
Yeah, just the site plan trees.
right. Okay,
And Walgreens did just to throw this out there, did a good job of putting some native cedars at the base of their stone wall that have grown up over the years, and it gets weedy, but it's softened.
yep,
And
Okay.
Andy, that's the east side of the
Yeah.
property?
yeah, it's the east side. East and north, I would say.
and the variety of trees can be adjusted as well. I mean, if somebody
Okay.
decides evergreens on the back could work, I think that would be a fine
Okay,
substitution.
I think we're good with that.
Yeah, the variety of trees can be all altered. Subject to approval by staff. Yeah.
Okay.
I think that's a reasonable compromise.
All right, is there anything else you wish to add, or is that it?
No, I don't see anything else.
Okay. Can I have a motion to approve?
I'll make the motion, Mike, here.
And Mike Mushak makes the motion. Is there a second?
I'll second. Tammy,
And Tammy Langelis has seconded. Any discussion? Okay, if not, let's do a roll call. This is to
Sure.
approve the changes as outlined in the resolution.
Mr. Williams,
Yes.
Miss Jordan Byron,
Yes.
Miss Tabashnik,
Yes.
Miss Wells,
Yes.
Mr. Cantor,
Yes.
Miss Langalis,
yes,
Mr. Mushak,
Yes,
Mr. Rowena,
Yes.
and Mr. Schulman.
Yes.
Thank you all.
Okay, it's approved unanimously. Again, for this next item, Ms. Tabachnik, I'm going to unseat you and seat our newest member, Mr. Bryce. And this item is 2023-17 Cam Philip and Erwin Kerr. I'm sorry, Aaron Kerr. My apologies. 86 Bluff Avenue, demolish an existing, I assume that's a building, and build a new single-family residence to be made flood compliant. Report and recommend action. And are they represented by you, Attorney Blank?
Yes, sir.
Okay, your
All
show.
right. Great, thanks. Good evening, all. Adam Blank, attorney for the owners, Philip and Aaron Kerr. I'll share my screen. So I'm going to give you a quick overview, and then there's a few others that are going to tell you a little bit more about the project. 86 Bluff Avenue is here. And I think anybody that has a kid or grew up in Norwalk knows the Bell Island Bridge here that everybody likes to jump off of is right there. So this is there's an existing house here. It's not FEMA compliant. It's right on Farm Creek. We do have sign-offs from SNU, Health, DPW, WPCA. We appeared in front of the Harbor Commission and they voiced their support for the project. It's in the AE 15 coastal flood zone. The property has had flooding in the past. And the first floor is at elevation 6.9, so it's 9 feet below the compliance level. But it's not within the velocity zone or the VE zone. What we're proposing will make it fully comply with your regulations. I'll just show you a quick, and the architect can give you more. This is from the street view of the structure. The landscaping's you'll hear is slightly different, but this is gives you a good sense of it. And this is from the water side of the proposed development. The structure itself, it's on a small lot. It's only 7,000 square feet, so that's pre-existing non-conforming. The A residence requires 12,500, and the existing structure that's there was legally non-conforming in a number of ways, which this will essentially mirror. It's not going to make things worse. It's going to essentially sit in the footprint of the old, but move it slightly away from the water. So we did obtain the necessary variances, and the structure will otherwise comply with all of your regulations. Redness and Mead is the project engineers. Craig Flaherty's here, and we'll be talking to you in just a minute. They've done the drainage calculations, and there was no drainage treatment on the existing home. But they're actually proposing a fairly substantial drainage improvements that will vastly improve, obviously, the drainage and water quality at the site. Mark Goodwin from Beinfield Architecture is the project architect. He'll give you an overview briefly of the house. And Matt Pop, yep, he made it. Matt's here. And actually, Matt, if you have to leave, because I know you have another commitment, we could change our order around if we need to get you in there first. Otherwise, we'll deal with you later on.
Please do.
Deal with you first? Yeah. Okay. So I'll tell you, we did share the plans with the two immediate neighbors, Beth and Ron Chapman at 56 Samus, and Summer Chatwin and Jonathan Walk at 84 Bluff, and they voiced their support for the project, and that's in your file. There's a written support. And we do have the owners, Philip and Aaron, they're on the Zoom, and if questions come up, they can answer those. With that limited sort of intro, Matt is the time-pressed one, so we'll let Matt, you want to deal with the landscaping to start?
And Matt, before you get started, Mr. Schulman, both Hector, Mr. Pachis, and Mr. Williams had to hop off. So if you wanted to see Mr. Bashnik, you have a open spot for both her and Mr. Williams.
Thank you. I knew we were losing one. I didn't know we were losing Mr. Williams. Sure. So everyone is now seated. Okay.
Great. Good evening. Matthew Pop, landscape architect, environmental land solutions. We're out of Norwalk. I prepared the landscaping plan for the project. It's a very narrow band between the development and the coastal area that's on the site. I mainly proposed what you typically would find in this location, mainly like grasses, switchgrass, goldenrods, and some blackgrass. So those are the main species that I used. I also like the grasses because the deer don't eat them. And the other typical plants that grow there, just a little bit higher up that I proposed would be like the bayberry and the red cedar. So we're trying to keep with the native theme along the shoreline. That's it briefly. On the kind of north side of the site, we did propose a shad and some inkberry just to for additional wildlife habitat. On the landscape plan, it doesn't show the foundation plants, but typically, a house like this would have plantings around, the front foundation and probably around the side. There we go. So I didn't think the foundation plants should be attached to an approval, but these plants would be attached to the approval, and they would be, maintained. You can kind of see the narrow band right along the shore. Again, mainly the switchgrass, the seaside goldenrod, black grass, and kind of in the middle. And towards the front, we got the red cedar and the bayberry. I was hoping to get maybe a tree in the front, but we do have the water quality basin there, and we're kind of concerned about sight lines also, from the road. So that's it. Quickly, if there's any questions or comments, be happy to answer them.
Mike here.
Mhm.
That all looks good, and I'm just gonna say that I landscaped the house just to the north of it
Yeah.
in 2012, I guess it was, the year of Sandy. Sandy. I finished the job, and a week later, Sandy came in and demolished all the boats picked up at the boatyard. That's why I'm surprised this is not in a high velocity zone, because the waves came crashing across Bluff Avenue, carried the boats that were moored. They broke their moorings, and the boats all ended up against the front of this client's house who lived in the city. And I took pictures and sent them to her, and her whole landscape was destroyed. And they had to bring cranes in and pick the boats up off of her house.
Yep.
And the idea that it's not a high velocity zone just is astonishing to me. But I'm just sharing that because the storms as bad as Sandy, everybody's almost in a high velocity zone if they're on a 100-year floodplain. I mean, it's almost, you can't really get away from the waves were crashing into the front of her house and smashed the windows and everything. It was pretty crazy. So and this house that's being demolished was really wrecked. I was surprised that they actually fixed it up at the time, but now they're finally lifting it. So anyway, just a Norwalk story, I guess.
Thank you.
And Craig, can you just to follow up on Mike's comment, can you talk about that we're building on piers?
Yeah, I mean, that's to steal Mark's thunder as well. But even though we are in what is regulatorily a backwater zone, we're actually building the first level to velocity zone standards. So it'll be on the structural piers and the walls will be breakaway.
Well, and good.
Craig, do you want to go through unless
Sure.
there's other questions for Matt, you want to go through your presentation?
Yeah. Okay, so yeah, there was that same aerial. These first two are just to give you a quick color view of existing conditions. Gray is hardscape and improvement. Green is softer or landscape. And I'm going to toggle to the proposed conditions from the existing conditions. So you can see it's a very similar amount of overall impervious coverage, but what we tried to do, if you look along the edge along Farm Creek, is where we could move back the improvements away from Farm Creek and get that buffer area that Matt is planting in. That's shown similarly with this exhibit. This is the existing footprint of the home. You can see how close the footprint of the home gets to the edge of the resource, and we've also pulled that back, meaningfully, but maintained a very similar footprint. Although at the ground level, we should point out all of this that's colored in tan here sits on the ground on the existing site, but the proposed site, only the core will sit on the ground. The rest of these areas are overhangs or upper story. So we're actually significantly reducing the mass at that more vulnerable level. On the civil side, we've prepared the stormwater mitigation plan. So even though we're only increasing impervious surfaces by just under 300 square feet, less than two parking spaces, we're actually providing water quality treatment for 2,300 square feet of the hardscape. There's a new infiltration system under the back terrace and a new infiltration system under the front lawn, reviewed and approved by the Department of Public Works. In addition to the drainage, we've got sediment erosion control plan as part of the civil set to provide temporary erosion control measures during construction. We've prepared a coastal area management assessment, looking at the area resources and the potential for impact or lack thereof on area resources. We found in general, we're having an incremental net positive benefit on water quality runoff, and none of the other resources are impacted. We coordinated with RACE, the coastal engineers, to do a more in-depth flood impact analysis, reviewing the wave crest, the wave run up, and the kind of dynamics of the flood to make sure we were not having an impact on any of those conditions. And that letter is also in your record, a finding that there is no impact to the nature of the flooding by virtue of the construction proposed. So that's the broad overview of the civil aspects. I will let Mark show you around the house.
Any questions for Craig? Okay, Mr. Goodwin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mark Goodwin, Byfield Architecture. We're here in Norwalk. Happy to design this house for the Kerrs. If either Adam or Craig could pull up the plans, that'd be
Sure,
great.
I'll
Yep.
do it.
Yeah, that'd be great, Craig. Thanks.
The renderings of the plans.
Start with the renderings and we'll end with the start with the plans and we'll end with the renderings.
Okay, just give me one sec.
Thanks.
Of
Yes, as was discussed
course.
already.
Actually, if Adam has them, I couldn't find them quickly. So Adam, if you want to call them up.
I'll pull them up in a second. I'll let Mark talk and I'll pull.
Okay. Oh, wait, no,
Yeah.
I found them. Okay, good, got
All
them.
right, thanks, guys. So as discussed already, the first floor, the slab for the first floor slab for the first level of the house, the lowest level is where we're going to have parking. We're going to have entrance into the building and storage, and we have designed it so that the house is on piers, as you can see by the squares. All the walls in between will be breakaway, similar to the requirement in a VE zone, so everything will be able to break away and move out in the case of a severe storm. We have the area below in the plan is a covered deck, which you'll see on the second floor, but that's underneath the existing footprint of the house. So that covered patio area and the enclosed first floor are all part of the existing footprint of the house as it sits on the site today. And then on the first floor, we elevated to elevation 19, so we're in the flood zone 15. So first floor is up at 19. Main living spaces, the sort of compressed balconies and decks, as Craig mentioned, on the south and the west. Northwest corner is a mechanical platform, which will also be at elevation 19. So that's where any required equipment will sit, again, about 4 feet above the flood. The second floor will be up at elevation 29, and that's just has the bedrooms, balcony to the south. And then there's an attic level, which we have a 60% compliant attic with compliant dorms, about 740 square feet up inside the roof. Compliant dormers. This is a view from the street. Trying to keep in with the neighborhood, grade shingles and double hung windows, stone on the piers on the lower level, kind of giving the house a base, and then 2 stories above, and then the dormers and cupola on the roof. And on the rear side, you can see the wrapping around sort of narrow balcony, and the walls to the left are the shielded kind of mechanical area. Steps down from that balcony down to grade. And that's it. Let me know if you have any questions.
What's that up on the third story, the attic? Is there a balcony up there?
There's a flat roof. Yes, that's a flat roof deck. Correct.
Okay, thank you. Questions?
There might be one more thing worth pointing out. Was one little nit from the staff report. was wondering about a tree in the front yard we were proposing to remove where the driveway is. This is a picture of the tree a couple of days ago. It is dead. The Kerrs have left it up just because the kids like to play on it.
So I have a question. In regards to the height, how does this compare with the other houses on that street?
I know it complies with the zoning regulations as to height. We did not need a variance for height for this application, even though we were picking that first floor up. Mark did a good job of keeping the rest of it compact, but I'm unsure of how it compares to the others in the neighborhood.
It just looks very large in comparison to the houses on either side.
Well, again, we have written letters of support from both adjacent neighbors.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, this is Chapin. I see that the current driveway is gravel. Was gravel considered for the proposed driveway?
It was, but unfortunately, because we're picking up the lower level, there's flood compliance, and yes, you're allowed to have the lower level below a flood, but then there's flood practicality. So we're trying to keep the lower level up as well. So the driveway slopes up at about 10%, and unfortunately, porous surfaces don't do really well in steeper conditions. So we are proposing conventional asphalt for the driveway, but of course, the impacts of that are mitigated by the stormwater mitigation system that we're proposing that, you know, really turns back the clock on the property and you know, treats more stormwater than ever has been treated here.
Yeah, and the existing driveway was, I don't know, Mark or Craig may know the exact footage, but it was like 30 feet wide at the street. It was a
It was
super
60 feet
super
wide,
wide.
60 feet
all right,
wide
there
at the street. And basically the parking's in the city right away today, and that condition is being corrected. The curb cut is going from 60 feet to 30 feet with the 2 10-foot drives just to get into the garages.
Thank you. And a separate question I see on some of the plans, the pool, is that on the ground level? Maybe I missed it in some of the renderings there, but.
Yeah, it is on the ground level up at, you know, elevation 9.5-ish, 10-ish.
Okay.
That's right. Yeah. Oh, we should-
Anything else? If not, believe we have a resolution on this as well. Can we pull that up? Thank you, Amelia. Any questions about the resolution? If not, I'll ask for a motion to approve.
Motion to approve.
Okay, Ms. Tabachnik has moved approval. Is there a second?
I'll second Lou. Tammy.
Okay, and Ms. Langelis has seconded. Any other questions before we go to a vote? All right, if not, again, let's do a roll call on this.
All right, Ms. Tabashnik,
Yes.
Ms. Wells,
Yes.
Ms. Jordan Byron,
Yes.
Mr. Rowena,
Yes.
Mr. Cantor,
Yes.
Ms. Langalis,
Yes.
Mr. Mushak,
Yes.
Mr. Bryce,
Yes.
and Mr. Schulman.
Yes. It is approved unanimously. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
We're now going to move on to two public hearings.
You have one more item,
Oh, I'm sorry, did I miss something?
hopefully a quick one.
Oh, I apologize, Brian.
That's all right.
You're quite right. I skipped over 2023-26 SP modification R41 owner LLC, 41 Wolf Pit Avenue. Modifications to special permit to replace existing accessory structure on existing planned residential development site. And Attorney Blank, you representing the owners?
Yes, sir. Adam Blank, and I can, this is going to be a quick one on my part, absent your, questions, but so I'm the attorney for 41 Reserve Apartments. They own 41 Wolf Pit Avenue, which you probably know it better by the former name. It used to be Dreamy Hollow. And then my clients fairly recently purchased the property. It's undergone some substantial renovations and improvement. This it's a 164 unit garden style apartment complex. It's spread over 19 acres of land, and it's got this pool and a pool house in this corner here. And I'll zoom in. This is a survey of the property. We're talking about replacing the pool house, which is an accessory structure. This is the pool house. I don't have a photo of the existing, but you can trust me, it's pretty ugly. This is the 80-foot setback line for the side yard. And you can see it is pre-existing non-conforming. It encroaches on the setback. So what we've proposed to do, and it's small, it's 712-foot accessory use structure. The plan is this is the part that encroaches. This is going to be demolished. The whole structure is going to be demolished, which is here, and then replaced here. So it now is no longer over the setback line. So it'll be fully conforming to your regulations. It's a minor, I mean, it's a minor modification, but of the approved plans for this new accessory structure. It would house a leasing office, bathrooms, and like the gym area for the pool and for the residents within the apartment. It'll be 1,245 square feet, so still fairly modest in size. They don't have elevations done yet, but this is the style that they're going for. And it's not going to look exactly like this, but this should give you a good sense of the aesthetic that they hope to achieve with the new pool house building. And so again, we think this is a fairly innocuous change, but it was required to come to you, and we're hoping that you'll approve this new accessory structure.
Ms. Williams, any comments on this?
No, I think Attorney Blank covered it well. Ideally, this would be something we could approve as staff, but the regulations do require any accessory structures at PRDs like this to come before you guys, but I think it's pretty straightforward.
Okay. Can you pull up the draft resolution, please? Are there any questions?
Adam, it seems like they're doing a bunch of like renovation or at least like cosmetic work in that complex. Is that true?
Yeah,
I painting.
So my knowledge is a little bit limited. I know that they've done a lot of work on the interiors of them, and I know that they anticipate in the near future doing as close as they can to a sort of a complete overhaul of the landscaping and the walkways within the complex. I'm not sure that will be complete, but they're they're making some real significant improvements to the property, which
Yeah,
is
they're
nice.
painting all, it looks like they're painting all the buildings too right
Yeah,
now.
yeah, they've been roofing them all as well.
Yeah. Sorry, I walked by their office, so I was just curious.
Any other questions? If not, can I have a motion to approve the resolution? Mike, was that your hand going up?
Yeah, I figured I would.
Mr. Mushak has moved it. Is there a second?
This is Chapin, I'll second it.
Okay, Mr. Bryce has seconded. Any questions before we go to a vote? Okay, let's pull this down. I think this one, I think we can do this with a show of hands. All those in favor? Hands or thumbs? Looks to me like it's unanimous. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, it is unanimous. Thank you, Attorney Blank.
Thank you.
You're not done with them yet.
No, I understand.
Can't get rid of me.
We'll now move on to the public hearings. From what I can tell, there are four times. There are only a handful of people on line who may wish to comment. So I'm just going to briefly explain how we conduct our public hearings. The applicant or the applicant's representative will explain the project, or in this case, the text amendment. And the commission members will have an opportunity to ask any questions they wish during the presentation.
Now you go out and now you come back in.
After the presentation is completed, we will open it up for public comment, and at that point, either Mr. Baker or Ms. Williams will explain how you can access the public hearing to make comments. When everyone in the public who wishes to comment has had an opportunity, we will allow the applicant to respond to the comments that have been made. Again, the commission members will have an opportunity to ask questions, raise any concerns they have. And when that's completed, we will close the public hearing and move on to action. All we ask is that members of the public identify themselves by providing their names and their home addresses, and that they simply conduct themselves in a civil, polite manner, as we do the same. With that, the first public hearing is 2023-07R, Sono TOD 2 LLC, zoning regulation text amendment to Article 30 and Article 50 to revise historic preservation regulations. Is that going to be you, Attorney Blank, or?
Yes, yes,
All right.
Mr. Chairman. And with me tonight is Henry Conroy from Spinnaker, the developer and owner on the site. Technically, the owner is Sono TOD 2 LLC, but that's an affiliate of Spinnaker. So by way of background, the historic text amendment that's in front of you has been sort of been proposed at this point in time because of the proposed development at 15 Chestnut Street. The Spinnaker previously did development here at 1 Chestnut Street, which included the Leroy Shirt Factory, which was the historic structure, and then a new multifamily building on the corner, the platform. This was the the platform and the shirt factor, these were a rendering, that's not the actual photos. And then after construction, this is that platform building that's now right by the train station. So that was sort of one phase of the development, with the plan that they would get through that phase and then do another phase next door. You had in front of you, maybe at your last meeting, or it may have been 2 meetings ago, referral from the city, 8-24, for the city to sell some land, which is sort of this back end and a little bit over here, to Spinnaker to facilitate this development, which will ultimately include 60 spaces coming back to the city in structured parking that will be on this site. As part of that development, the city is getting from the state, I believe it's a $6.5 million grant, and one of the conditions of that grant was that this development have a minimum of 200 new units of housing, which we can only meet with historic preservation credit, which exists in the zone currently and exists in many zones currently. But we saw 2 things that were, I'll say, concerning about the existing reg. Number one was that it varied from district to district in how it's applied and what the rules are for it and what you can get. And it didn't seem to make sense to have, 8 different regs that all are supposed to accomplish the same thing. So we proposed this as across all of the zones that currently have a historic preservation reg. If you wanted to tonight, you could adopt it just for the SSDD, but we proposed it for a citywide. That's number one. Number two is that this reg will, the way it's been written now, allows you to take an adjacent parcel. So the historic structure in our case is this building here, which is, although this is one development, it's on a separate tax lot. And so what the text amendment says is that your historic structure, it can be on the same property or it can be on an abutting property. If it's on the abutting property, then there's a whole lot of criteria so that, the abutting property owner's got to consent to it. It's going to go on their land record. They're stuck with the conditions as well. And we've even added in, which was not in any of the existing regs, about sort of what happens if the historic structure that gave you the right to whatever bonuses you've got is destroyed. And this really benefits to the city's benefit, because under this reg now, the special permit either becomes void, it lapses, and you're in violation, or you have to either work with the city to reconstruct the historic structure, or it has to become publicly accessible open space. So it can't be destroyed, or you can't let it fall into disrepair and then say, great, now we're going to build a new apartment building on it. It's either going to be open space or you got to reconstruct it. So that's the new development that's planned over here. We're hoping to have the special permit application for that filed. It could be as soon as this week, or certainly within the next couple of weeks. We've already started on the peer review architecture and the peer review traffic. It will be the development that's proposed needs the historic text amendment, one, so that we can get the density. The other thing is that we're adding 60 public spaces to the site. And by adding those spaces, it takes our development, which would otherwise be within the height requirements, the 7 stories. It will bring it above the maximum stories that's allowed. So we would need a 1-story bonus that again is permitted under the historic text amendment. And in the regs as they exist currently, if you're doing public parking, you can get 8 stories. So we wouldn't need a bonus if this was entirely public parking, but because it's kind of a mix, it would be a little risky to say that we're entitled to 8 stories sort of as of right because it's a public parking garage, because it's really only partially a public parking garage. But the reason that we need to go a story higher is because we're adding the public parking. So so that's, you know, what I think on the special permit, what you'll see us asking for that extra height and the density. The text change we think fits right in with the SSDD's purpose and intent for inducing economic investment, enhancing pedestrian activity, reducing vehicle miles traveled. It also comports with the text change with the POCD by promoting mixed-use transit-oriented development and that keeping development walkable. And it will of course add quite a number of reduced rate units. And I think that's kind of the gist of it. It does limit some of the existing regs that we have in some of the zones don't have limitations. So this puts some limitations on the maximum or minimum alterations from the originating standard that can occur. You know, so it's 30%. And we've worked this through a few times with staff to try to come to something that I think works. And this reg, I think just about verbatim matches what's in your proposed overall zoning rewrite historic preservation regulation. This matches up just about perfectly. I think there's some typos actually in your rewrite version, but otherwise it matches up.
Attorney Blank,
yeah,
that additional story, that's needed to get to the 200 units?
So I mean, you could argue it's needed for the units, or it's needed because of the retail, or it's needed because of the parking. What I can sort of definitively say is that if we weren't providing 60 extra spaces for public parking beyond what our site actually needs, we wouldn't need an extra story. And so if you said, all right, I'll buy that the stories, the need for the stories generated by the extra parking that you're going to be providing to the public, you're already allowed 8 stories if you're providing public parking anyway. So it kind of matches up with that. But yeah, you couldn't, whatever, something would have to give. You'd have to lose the parking, you'd have to lose the units, or you'd have to lose the retail. And the retail, your staff would kill us if we tried to get rid of, and we can't get rid of the units, or the state won't give the city the grant money, and we can't get rid of the parking because in order to get the land from the city, we promised to provide back 60 public spaces. So we kind of need everything to make this deal work.
And remind us again, how much money would be lost if you don't have the 200 units?
Yeah, so Henry, what was the Spinnaker's is paying the city how much on the deal?
Well, that's not what that wasn't my
The
question.
state's
My
$6.5
question
million.
is a state grant.
Yeah, that's
So there's 2 components. We're purchasing the lot from the city for $4.6 million at a fair market appraisal, and then the DECD grant that has been signed by the city of Norwalk with the state is for $6 million tied to the 200 unit development.
Bottom line is you could potentially lose $6 million in state funding for this project.
Yes, that would go towards
that goes to the city, not to us.
the city.
Right.
Well, I have a question about the height. I mean, so is this locked in? Because I thought we're still in the planning stage. 8 stories?
Well, so the special permit application will come in front of you, and you will be able to vote in favor or against that that hasn't occurred yet. But the development is dependent on 8 stories.
That's a lot, especially on that congested area. And in addition, you're creating a canyon because as in your presentation, the building right next to it, the brand new one that was just put up next to the shirt factory, that one is 5, correct?
6 stories.
6 or 5? Right. And so on this 2-block area, you have these, and then on the opposite side of the street, you have this other building that's going up. It's going to be such a dark canyon going down and such a narrow street. Now, I love the fact that you're going to be creating more parking, especially public parking, which is greatly needed. But I just can't envision how that is not going to create chaos when it comes to cars in this area. You're accommodating cars, and there's not even enough space for cars to even get through that area. Single file.
Brian, you're still there. Do you know, I can pull it up, but on the top of your head, I think the zoning rewrite has the SSDD, what was the SSDD, ranging from 8 to maybe 11 stories or 12, depending on where you are, with some limitations along maybe Wall Street. Does that sound right to you?
So the only part where it really got tall was up at Merritt Station, and that was specific to the North 7 development. What I would say for the height for this is that in the SSDD right now, you can ask for historic preservation development and use the existing regulation to go up the additional story or 2. So there's, it's already in the existing regulation. It's just that this one actually puts a specific number on how much you can actually ask to go up.
I have a different question. I know, Brian, I don't know if you remember something I asked last time when this came up is could we tie additional workforce housing to the added density in any which way with this historic bump?
Yeah, so I guess what you could say is, I think it's fair to ask for that. And then just from the other way to look at it is that density technically wouldn't be permitted under regular conditions. So those new units that you're adding are subject to that 10% workforce housing. So like you're kind of picking up that 10% that wasn't there in the first place. But, if you're like looking for an additional number, I think that's, for you guys to.
Like a 5%. I asked the commission to think about that. Like this seems like an interesting case to actually get more affordability units in by giving density grants. Not saying go 20, additional 10%, but maybe additional 5%, something to consider.
But Nick, are we getting ahead of ourselves? Is that a decision to be made
I think it's
tonight?
made
Or is
tonight.
that a decision- Is
Yes.
that a decision to be made when they come before us for the special permit?
No, I think you can tie it into we can say anyone using this historical preservation bump is a condition of that there's, additional 5% of workforce housing or something like that. I would build it into the regs across the board, not plan specific.
Brian, is there any reason why that can't be done?
No, I don't think so. I mean, it's similar to using your existing workforce housing regulations. It's just, yeah.
Then let's discuss that when we pull up the resolution on this. Now,
Chairman, can I?
Before I recognize you, am I correct that the staff also had language for this?
Yes. So I'll pull that up. So this was some language Steve had kind of offered as from staff. It's relatively similar to what Mr. Blank had proposed. So I don't think it's a major change in any.
Why don't you show it to us and explain what the differences are?
All right, so any text that you see here, let me make it a little bigger. In red is new. So again, a lot of this isn't really substantive changes. Some of it's just, it's mostly minor. I think it still gets the applicant what they're sort of looking for in terms of a density increase. And then it kind of protects the city in some additional ways. It standardizes the 30% increase rather than, in certain cases or in certain zones, that number sort of fluctuates. So it kind of gives you one standard throughout for all historic preservation developments. And then just the additional standards of making sure that the historic structure is whoever the owner is of that is the co-applicant on this application, so that they are tied in with any new developments that come in trying to take advantage of this.
Can you come back down again?
Yeah, sure.
Is there a difference in meaning between adjacent and abutting?
Yeah, so I believe how for adjacent, what you could do is how I would interpret that is that I believe, and Adam, I know that you had spoken with Steve and we're trying to kind of wordsmith this. Adjacent would mean properties either across the street or side by side, or am I mixing these two up? Abutting is, I would assume abutting means that you actually share a property line instead of being separated by a right of way. So in this case, what this means is that abutting means that you have to share a property line with the historic property. So kind of make sure that the properties are located in close proximity to one another.
Okay, let's move on.
Lou, what do you think about that? Or I'd like to get other people's thoughts on adjacent versus abutting. Do you think people that this could be used more beneficially with adjacent versus abutting? As in, there's a historic building across the street that unless you're directly next to it, like the rarity of this just feels not that high with abutting versus adjacent, but I'm curious what other people think.
I prefer personally the more restrictive abutting. Because you then get into a discussion of what's adjacent. I mean, it's at an angle, or there's a vacant lot across the street, but the closest building, which maybe is 150 feet away, can be considered adjacent. Abutting is certainly clearer language.
I always think of the air rights of Grand Central's terminal in New York were sold up the tracks for like 10 blocks up Park Avenue because a court considered the Grand Central terminal extending 10 blocks north. And so they were, anyway, this was a discussion, I think, back in the 1980s when I lived in the city. And it's funny that I'm seeing this now, but I think abutting is better because adjacent really is a more
too loose
subjective word. Yeah, I know what you're saying though, but I think there's going to be enough. We have a lot of historic buildings in Norwalk, so I think that there's going to be a lot of situations where this can come up.
Well, the question is, what are we trying to encourage here? We're trying to encourage people to buy these historic buildings and preserve them in exchange for additional density, or do we want this to be a rare thing? Are we trying to encourage this? I think we are.
Yes, I think I agree with both Galen and Nick on this one for a change. Yeah, I think the primary function of what we're trying to do is to preserve historic buildings. So, who cares if it's adjacent or abutting? If it belongs in the same ownership and it has these restrictions on it, I especially like the part about what happens if it burns down or otherwise is destroyed.
And Mr. Chairman,
Yeah.
I have to recuse myself from this because it has to do with this Sono TOD. But I'm speaking because I think this is the generic part of this for the city.
Right.
Okay, let's
Right.
continue.
And I just have one more comment to add to the mix.
Go ahead, Jay.
Historic applies not just to the building, but also to the neighborhood. If you're crowding the neighborhood with skyscrapers, it no longer becomes a historical neighborhood. No, it no longer remains that way. Anybody want to comment on that?
Well, I think what we're
Thoughts?
talking about is one additional story.
Yeah,
One-
exactly.
I don't get quite
No,
as,
two additional stories that creates a skyscraper. And then that becomes, the next developer comes in and says, oh, well, that's only 6 stories or 8 stories. I now want to do 10.
Well, they can't. If we adopt this, that's foreclosed, I think. You know, and the idea is to preserve the historic building. It can't just be we're in a historic neighborhood, because then what are you going to be obligated to buy and preserve?
Yeah,
Right,
and
But you're talking
Right.
about like philosophically, we're focusing on the building when there's a larger question of the neighborhood.
Yes.
And I think that's just not what's up for discussion, but I see your point. I sort of, I know we were shown pictures. I'd like to see pictures again, not necessarily right now, but when I think about it, okay, so it's going to be a historic building. It has to be part of the larger development. The larger development can be quite higher than the historic building. So like, is it really part of it? Is it going to look weird? Like you've got a little church surrounded by these like things. And then with the adjacent idea, I like the idea of adjacent in terms of like, let's spread the goodness of preserving historic buildings and possibly turning them into parks when they fall down. But then again, now you're talking about if it's adjacent, then okay, now we're talking about a larger development of like a, do you know what I mean? I'm losing.
Well, it's not embedding it in the building. It's just next to it. Like they don't have to incorporate it into the design or anything like that.
So it's just that it happens to be.
It just
next
has to be
it.
there. Yeah.
Right.
And so-
I'm just concerned about the district of South Norwalk, Sono, losing its charm. And when people get off the train station, yes, they're going to see shiny new buildings, but they won't know that there was once a history there with factories and, you know, historical buildings and things that represent the shoreline and you know, the work of immigrants. They just won't know that because everything will be skyscrapers.
I mean, the counter argument though, JJ, there is they can just demo it if it's not a historic building, which a lot of the stuff actually isn't historic building, and build all brand new. So we're actually, I think this actually promotes the preservation of things that are on the fringe and gives you the different context. Like I always think, you know, the one spot in New York that I think is always really cool is Trinity Church down in the Wall Street area. It's such a small church surrounded by all the skyscrapers. And let's be clear, like we're not building 50-story skyscrapers. We're talking about 8-story buildings. We can have that debate when the project comes up. But I think the diversity of heights, like there's something really cool there versus the counter argument, not the counter argument, but what could be built by right is literally would be, I think, not what anyone's really would want from an aesthetic perspective. So I think it's how do we encourage that sort of, you know, preserving things that are on the edges that still give that historic feeling to the city, while also allowing for other things to go alongside it.
Well, yeah, that's great. Thank you so much, Nick, for saying that. I like for everyone to kind of keep that in mind. That really does, you know, say what's in my mind in terms of preserving the neighborhood as well as welcoming in new buildings and structures that will beautify the area.
And JJ, to your point too, so in the zone today, the regs actually, they give an additional story if you're building a commuter parking garage. So it's like, or, you know, that height seems like it'd be better used to house people than cars, especially so close to the train station. So, and also this just, I mean, this is getting beyond just the text amendment application, but the circumstances provided with this development are sort of unique in that they have to provide city parking and then do the retail on the first floor. So that's when you're deliberating on the actual development application. You know, if someone were coming in with different circumstances, you would say, you know, this doesn't warrant that additional height that you're asking for, whereas maybe in this circumstance it might. So just to add some context too.
Yeah, JJ, one
Right.
of the other things that could be done here is we might include language that says that the new building must in some way relate architecturally to the historic building. Now, I'm not sure that in this particular case that has much meaning because frankly, at least in my view, the Tie Factory is not a particularly attractive or historic looking.
But it maintained its brick facade.
Yes, and so again, we could include language that said there must be some relationship between the two buildings.
Yes.
And that the owner, the architect, must be sensitive to that in the design. And in the case of this particular development, it's going to undergo an architectural review, given the size of the project.
So, Mr.
You know
Chairman,
what,
can I?
Excuse me, Lou, I think this is taken care of with architectural review because you have so many different types of historic buildings. In some of them, it's very difficult to have a new building relate. I mean, how would the buildings around Trinity Church relate to Trinity Church? You know, I think that's a difficult standard to put in where we do have the architectural review
Well,
already.
there's a great example in Stanford. I forget the name of the church that's right across the street from the mall. That is right smack in the middle of this amazing like design that had the church in mind. I mean, the marriage is just wonderful. I'm sorry that the name of the church escapes me, but anyone who's been to the Stanford Town Center that looked directly across can see this the two together side by side.
All right, Adam, go ahead.
Yeah, so I just want to put a few points. So first is before this text amendment even sort of really came to be, and before it really even related to Spinnaker, there had some discussions with your staff because and this kind of goes to Mr. Cantor's comments, is that my thought was that why would you want, so right now the reg actually says it has to be part of a unified development. That's in the reg. So I think that takes care of Mr. Schulman's concern. I hated that. I thought it shouldn't have that at all because I thought you should be able to take a historic structure anywhere within a zone and tie it to a development somewhere else in your zone, because that was the way to reach the most historic structures and encourage the most preservation. And why would it matter if it was a unified development or not, or whether there was some relation to them? But it was a way to get you to pump money into preserving historic structures. And that, like Mr. Mushak was talking about Grand Central, that may not be the best example, but like in New York, they've done that fairly well for historic structures, but they've also, all the Broadway theaters, they've all, in order to, because New York said, we want to preserve Broadway. So they said to the theaters, we will allow you to sell your development rights to somebody within the zone, within 20 blocks. And that lets you sustain an industry that they wanted to sustain. And it allowed for higher density and higher heights in other places. So the number one, I don't mind if it's adjacent, abutting, or not at all. We kept it based on your staff's recommendation and Mr. Schulman's concerns as well, as narrow as possible. And it reads as abutting, but I think an argument could be made that it should be within the zone. That's number one. Number two, I think for Mr. Cantor's desire to sort of maybe tie in additional workforce housing into this reg. So I don't necessarily think I'm not going to say it's a bad idea in general. I think that it should be in the workforce housing reg, not in the historic preservation reg. And it could give you a hook on some historic preservation projects. But in my view, the purpose of this is to encourage historic preservation, not additional workforce units other than those that might be created by the historic preservation. And so if you're, because it is an ask, it's a monetary ask for the additional workforce units, and that's going to have to come from somewhere. And I'm going to guess that in most cases, it's going to come with the money that would have gone into the historic preservation. So it'll be a historic preservation application on its face with limited money being put into preserving a historic structure because you're now paying for additional workforce units. I think you can have, and I think we already do have workforce regs that allow you, if you have a lower income level, you have less parking need, or you can have more units. And I don't see anything wrong with that, but a mandate that if you're going to ask for a credit for preserving historic structure, you must in all cases put in more workforce units. And remember, this is not tied to residential. This could be a strictly commercial development where you're getting bonuses for setbacks or for height, and you're not proposing any residential. So I'm not sure how that it would be fair to say, well, only if you're doing multifamily now you've got to put in workforce, but if you're doing an industrial use or another commercial use, you don't have to do it.
We have the fee in lieu in the new regs that you can apply here as well. I hear what you're saying. Anyway, sorry, go ahead. I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, I mean, so I think, and I'll be frank, I think if you're going to try to tie in a workforce housing component to this reg, that it ought to be given some more thought and attention to the details, which I think can be done in the overall rewrite. But I don't want to stall this project for it, and I wouldn't like it to be a mandate.
Attorney Blank, have you completed your presentation? Yeah. Okay, then let's open this up to the public, and then we can revisit these issues as needed after we've closed the hearing or in the latter part of the hearing. So, Brian, you want to explain how members of the public can access the site to speak?
Sure. So right before I do that, what I'll do is just do some administrative stuff to get that out of the way. So the application was referred to Westcog, who made no finding of significant impact to our abutting towns. It was referred to the Harbor Management Commission, who made no finding of an inconsistency with the harbor management plan. And it was referred to Connecticut Deep. That one we are required to pull up and put on the screen. So I'll pull that one up quickly. I believe I got the right one here. So sort of to summarize their comments is they found it mostly consistent with the Connecticut Coastal Management Act, just sort of pending some concerns about if the developments were to go directly adjacent to the water or in flood zones, that they would, have some additional concerns there. But for the most part, they found the text amendment to be okay with the Connecticut Coastal Management Act.
Okay.
All right, and with that, if there's anyone from the public who would like to speak, you could use the raise your hand tool. It's at the bottom of your screen. You'd click that once. If you're on a phone, you'd hit *9 and that will raise your hand. Again, the raise your hand tool, it's at the bottom of your screen. It's a little hand icon. You click that once. Seeing none, Mr. Schulman.
All right. Then we'll go back to Attorney Blank.
I don't have anything further.
Okay. Then we will close the public hearing and move on to action. Like to get feedback as to whether you would prefer to work off Attorney Blank's submission or the staff submission.
I would prefer the staff submission.
Is the staff submission the one that says to encourage the preservation of structures? Is that one page with a teeny bit on the second page?
Yeah, I'll pull that up for you, Tammy.
Oh, I have it on my other computer. Thank you.
Okay.
Can I just add that I like using both abutting and adjacent neighbors or properties? I don't know if that's going to be worked into this, but I think we should use both terms.
I don't see the value. If that's the way you want to go, then we should use the word adjacent, which covers abutting.
Oh, all right. I wasn't sure if people decided if adjacent does cover abutting as well.
Oh, I think it certainly does.
Okay.
I personally prefer abutting rather than adjacent, again, because it's more limiting and it's clearer, less likely to get us into argument with developers who over the definition of adjacent.
Well, to that question, like, right, like if you were using adjacent, I think we would need to define that. But I think Attorney Blank made a good point in terms of the purpose of just preserving the historic buildings. And if that's the case, why not? Why does it need to be nearby at all, right? Like, I think you mentioned being in the same zone or being in a 10-block radius or something. Are these are all buildings that wouldn't necessarily be preserved otherwise? Do we definitely want them to be preserved? There was that building downtown, I think on Main Street, that they wanted to expand the hotel into, and there was that question, is this the type of building that like somebody could buy that property and then let them go higher or wider or whatever? Would we end up in a situation where they're preserving buildings that maybe folks don't want to be preserved? I don't know, but if it's a good thing, I'm starting to come around to like, why limit it in that way?
Is that something worth exploring in the new regulations as opposed to tonight? I'm also new to this idea and trying to weigh it as well and think about the geographic restriction.
So both Mr. Bryce and Mr. Besh. So sort of how Adam described it was, it's called transfer of development rights. Essentially, somebody can sell like development rights of their property to somebody else who then purchases them and then can use like that density bonus on their property. So we don't have it in Norwalk. I mean, there's a few communities that do. The only issue that we have, like staff, is just the sort of the how to administer it. Because it involves deed restrictions, it involves that kind of stuff. So I think from staff's perspective, I don't think we're opposed to it. I think it would just take some more consideration on how that program sort of would get implemented to make it the most effective that it can be. So I think, to Mr. Bryce's point, I think implementing as part of like the reg rewrite is a good
I'd be concerned with the use of adjacent. For example, what happens in East Norwalk where someone gets the use of a historic building in order to get additional bonuses to possibly go higher, when we already know that the community is up in arms over the existing zoning. There's no telling if we don't limit this in some way where it may pop up and bite us.
If we don't limit it, not if we do limit it.
Exactly. I think if we limit it, the Planning and Zoning Commission and the staff have more control over it. And again, that's why I prefer the word abutting rather than adjacent.
I think I also lean towards the word abutting, but want to explore, especially in the context of the rewrite, maybe a different different word or concept here. I'm lacking the vocabulary, but
well, Chapin, it seems to me what we could do is act on this this evening. But if we want to make further changes in the rewrite, we certainly can do that.
But will the rewrite directly affect what is projected now for this building? Like, right now, this is concept, and we're all working together to shape the outcome.
Yeah, JJ, I think they're going to submit all of this before the rewrite becomes effective. So they would apply under whatever sort of language you adopt as part of this.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, and the purpose of adopting it sooner rather than later is to help this project move forward.
In that case, it really doesn't matter whether we say abutting or adjacent, because then this project will move forward and we reconsider the whole thing in the rewrite.
Well,
so probably just spending more time than we need to. And I'm not sure that I really understand the difference in definition between abutting and adjacent.
Abutting means it.
Yeah, so abutting means you're sharing a property line. Adjacent means you can do it. You can, like, adjacent would include properties across the street from you.
And close proximity.
Yes, you could kind of like be kitty cornered, like if you share. Yeah, it gets a little trickier.
Exactly. Well, in order to start to move this forward, if I may, can I have a motion to approve what we have in front of us? And
well, I want to know why we can't put. Okay, so are we going to get a chance to explore the idea that Nick put on as far as workforce housing, to make that a condition or to make that a consideration?
You can if you wish, but I do think that Attorney Blank's suggestion that it makes more sense in the workforce housing regulation makes sense to me. That's where it belongs. It doesn't necessarily belong here.
I agree with that. And several years ago, Lou will remember, we hired a consultant and did this whole look at workforce housing, how, the developers say we can't afford it, we can't afford it. We say we need it. How do we meet in the middle? How do we get as much as we can possibly get? Because there's no question about the need, without making it so onerous for the developers. I think if we want to relook at this issue, we should relook at this issue, but do it in the workforce housing and do it for the broader application of the, in the context of the rewrite. It's our opportunity, but we need to look at it in a sort of systematic way and not just throw it out, you know what I mean? Because it has significant economic impact.
I agree with Galen, but I'd also remind you what the attorney told us. It was either our last meeting or the meeting before, when we were discussing these issues. He said developers will always tell you that they can't afford to do this or that.
Right.
And when you insist, they do it.
That's true. That's what
So
we.
I'm more hopeful that you know, we can adopt something which will provide for more affordable housing for the city, either by changing the percentage that is required, or changing the income limits, perhaps lowering those income limits so that more people with lower incomes can afford to live in that housing. But again, I think that all belongs in the affordable housing regulation.
I hear that, and I just dislike the missed opportunity that this is so presently before us to do that.
Yeah, it feels
I
like you're
agree.
kicking the can down. It feels like you're kicking the can down to you know, the next goal line. I would hate to miss that opportunity to do something to create more affordable housing, as well as to the attorney Blank's point. You know, you're getting a bonus for this extra, you know, density. So why can't it be a win-win?
Do we add language similar to what we have here where it provides the commission may increase or reduce ... by no more than? Could we add similar language here about workforce housing that provides like a percentage or something like that, that does leave the like a threshold or a limit? That way we don't have to define a hard percentage of which gets set, but can define a threshold maybe. Would that be a way to address it tonight and include it?
Well, again, Chapin, you know, there are at least two ways to go on this. One is to increase the number of housing units, and the other is to reduce the income required in order to be eligible for that housing. So, I mean, I think it takes further discussion.
But that's
We
a
have-
major
we
state
have-
rewrite.
Excuse me, JJ, we have two upcoming meetings in June. They're both going to be public hearings regarding the new regulations. But we have July and August, and we can put this issue on one or both of those meeting agendas to actually move on this, not just kicking it down the road, but saying this is when we're actually going to discuss this. So
Yeah, I
But,
think.
but in either case, we missed this project. If we don't act on it tonight, or we don't mention it in this conversation, they submit next week or 2 weeks, which is probably the timeline that Attorney Blank already said. This project is out of scope for whatever changes come in July.
Well,
So-
that's correct.
Right.
Right?
And
Right, so
they're opening up this, or requesting to open up this particular regulation to make a change for the purpose of this project, but it would also apply to, you know, across the city. It's an opportunity for us to add something else. And when we do the rewrite, if we decide that, oh, 5% was a bad idea, it should have been 3% and bring it down to 50% of AMI, we could make that change then.
We use that may language in that though, that way there is that discretion.
Yeah, I think you have like the discretion, like, so, you know, so from staff's perspective, I think like listening to all the comments that have come in, I think it's definitely something where I wouldn't want to throw out just a number that we feel is right. I would rather have like, you know, us to take a look at what number we'd want and then apply it across the board to all developments rather than just these specific type developments. But if you're looking for like, as part of this specific project to increase the amount of affordable units it has, I mean, they have to come back with a special permit, which gives you much more discretion as part of what you're looking for as part of the approval. So I think, you have, if you don't have it in the text for this, you're going to have the chance to, when they come in with their special permit application, say, we would like to see additional workforce units as part of this development.
But if I may, I think the idea of this application is, it's not really about housing. It's about historic preservation. And, most of the applications that we get in front of us are for housing, but they might not be. What if, some light industry wanted to come into one of these historically preserved buildings? And so I'm going to go back and agree with Lou that I think the affordable housing part is for a different area. It doesn't fit in here.
Tammy, what I would propose is use Lou's language that he has in the rewrite for commercial buildings for the affordable house to pay into affordable housing. There's Lou's great idea for all commercial activity, not only residential, to be part of helping with affordable housing. So I'd say we can apply that same proposal in the same model. So you have, if it's a residential, it's more density or fee in lieu, I would imagine, because maybe you don't want to do it, whatever. Or if it's commercial, it's the fee as a result. I think there's a way to work it in. I hear, Brian, what you're saying. Like, if you're saying, Brian, we could demand get additional workforce housing in this potential project by right of the special permit, then maybe I can be okay with this tonight. But I just don't want to lose the opportunity here of this, like, because you're getting a significant bump of density, which I'm like the biggest proponent of. So like, I'm not against it. It's not like a roundabout way of not doing it. It's just how can we figure out a way to increase this part of the housing stock that everyone always talks about and there's not a lot of levers for.
Yeah. I mean, I don't disagree with what you're saying. I mean, my concern with this is this project has, it's being tied to state funding and all sorts of additional restrictions from whether it's the redevelopment agency and whatever contingencies are baked into that. If you start to mess with that, if that messes anything up with those terms and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, this project's already priced out
Right.
without taking into account additional, we're already getting 10%, but which I agree, I would rather have more, but
Well, the bigger they make the building, the more 10% is, ironically.
All right, again, in order to try and reach resolution, can I have a motion to approve the resolution so that we can get a better sense of where we stand? Galen, your hand went up. Does that mean you'll move that we approve the resolution?
yes.
Okay. Is there a second? Okay, Tammy.
Tammy, I'll
Looks like
second.
Tammy is seconding. Further discussion before we move to a vote?
Right here, I just have a question. I don't think we can address Attorney Blank at this point, right? Because we've already.
No, we
moved
cannot.
beyond. So is it agreed that we're doing 10% in this project? Does anybody know, Brian?
Yeah, so as part
Because SSDD had other options.
yeah, so in the workforce housing regs, 10% is the requirement, and then there's additional. If you're looking for additional increases, there's fees in lieu or other things that you could take advantage of. But 10%, just to be on the safe side, it's 10%.
We don't have an application yet, so you can't really answer that accurately anyway.
Oh, right, yeah. Looking at specific, I'm not.
Yeah, but 10% minimum, but there's a potential to go up based on the formulas that are already in our regs.
Yes.
I'm not sure we know that yet, for certain. But again,
I'm pretty
it's a discussion, it seems to me, that should be deferred until we hear about the special permit.
Yeah, I just recall when the South Norwalk TOD regulation was passed, I don't know, 5-6 years ago, whatever it was, there were other options available for density bonuses, but I can't say that I'm that familiar with it at this point.
All right,
I've
Brian,
been through a lot of
can I-
rewrites, I have to say.
go ahead, Anna.
Can I ask a question, Brian? You said that this could possibly be conditioned or addressed during the special permit. I know I'm new here. The special permits that I think I've been involved with, I don't remember hearing that we had that option. It seemed like, is that solely because this is in a different part of town? Or has that always been there, that with any special permit, we can say, yeah, it's 10%, but we'd like to see 15?
No, so I think that 10% is the base requirement, right? And then for any specific project that comes in, you can ask for, why aren't you including more? I don't think you can like require them to do 15%. It's really just that with a
You
special
can
permit.
ask why they're not doing more, and they say because it's not required, and then we all move on with the conversation.
And
Yeah, I mean, I think it gives you just more discretion on sort of why aren't they increasing the affordable units. But I mean, in terms of these types of developments, the historic preservation ones, again, with this, like this is a project where they're getting a bonus density based on preserving the historic structure, so that 10% is applying to additional units that weren't there. And then for like this specific project, with the strings that tied to it with the state funding, like that's where it kind of gets a little tricky with if you mandate additional requirements. I don't know if that affects any sort of agreements that are in place. So I don't really want to sort of get into that stuff.
All right.
10% is, just to remind everybody, 10% of 200 is 20, so. Did I get my math
The
right?
basic math, Mike. Brian, let's do a roll call.
All righty, let's see here. Ms. Tabashnik? And this is a motion
No.
to approve.
No.
Mr. Cantor?
Oh, yeah. I'm so torn on this one. No.
Ms. Langallis?
Yes.
Ms. Wells?
Yes.
Ms. Jordan Byron?
No.
Mr. Mishak?
Yes.
Mr. Bryce?
Yes.
And Mr. Schulman?
Yes. Did you forget Mr. Rowena?
I
Recused
have to
himself.
abstain.
Oh, sorry, Richard.
Richard, even though this is just the general legislation and not the specific
I
project?
couldn't make up my mind about it, to be honest with you, so I'm erring on the side of caution.
No, that totally makes sense. I was just curious, sorry.
So motion carries.
Okay. Thank you, Brian. Thank you all for the discussion. I think it was an important conversation. And Brian, will you see that the issue of affordable housing is on the agenda either for our July meeting or one of the August meetings? I think it's actually, I think we only have one August meeting. Okay, we do have a second public hearing. I think this one is going to go a little bit faster, but I'm going to ask Richard, should we take a 10-minute break? I see a lot of heads nodding.
Let's
It's
do 5 minutes. Do we need 10? Can we do 5? People can do 5.
We're not going to argue about this, Nick.
5 is good.
It's 8:58. Let's get back together at 9:10. 2, 4, 5, 6. All right, I'm sure that the people I'm not seeing yet will be with us very briefly. So I'm going to start again. I'll do it quickly because as far as I can see, there are only 2 other people on attending this public hearing, other than those of us shown. Explain how we conduct the public hearing. We will have the applicant explain the project, during which time commission members can ask any questions they wish. After the presentation's been completed, we will invite the public to ask questions or comment. When each member of the public who wishes to speak has had an opportunity, we will turn it back to the applicant. And again, the commission members will have an opportunity to ask any questions they wish. We ask that applicants identify themselves, excuse me, with their name and their address in town. And that everyone conduct themselves in a polite manner as we will conduct ourselves towards them. And it now appears that everyone is here. And this second and last public hearing is 2023-16R, the Department of Transportation, Mobility and Parking, TMP, zoning regulation, text amendment to Article 80, general regulations regarding right-of-way expansions. Attorney Sapienza, are you going to represent TMP in this?
Yes, and I'm also here with Attorney Taisha Toms from the City of Norwalk Law Department. And if you'd like, I'd give a brief synopsis of the application.
Okay, please.
So the City of Norwalk's Department of Transportation, Mobility and Parking is seeking to expand various streets and sidewalks throughout the city. In doing so, there is a potential where they may need to take slivers of take or acquire slivers of private property throughout their expansion plans. There was some concern that in doing so, they might subject some of those properties to, by taking a sliver of their property, render them non-conforming into one or more aspects of the Norwalk zoning regulations. There are a few legal remedies to this. One of them is what we're proposing tonight, which is a text amendment that kind of absolves property that's been taken by the city from nonconformities, and this is one approach that's been taken by other municipalities, at least one other in Connecticut. So we thought it would just help alleviate any negative effects that may arise from TMP's expansion plans.
And would you please explain the language of the change?
Sure. So the language is that when a portion of a lot is acquired by the City of Norwalk for purposes of improving or widening a street, then it will not, the remainder portion will not be deemed to be non-conforming. And it will not be in violation of the Norwalk zoning regulations.
What if the taking is more than a sliver, but very substantial piece of someone else's property? Would the same language apply there?
It would if it's for the purpose of improving or widening a public street. Although as the city being the applicant, or as a city being the taker acquire, in some instances, it can also apply for a variance and go the more traditional route. And I think that's what it would do in those situations to keep harmony with the zoning commission. But this is another proposed solution to help alleviate that problem.
Okay. Any questions for either Attorney Toms or Sapienza?
What would happen if the property was already non-conforming? Would taking more of it render it conforming under this?
No, only the portion that was taken for purposes of the expansion, according to the language that we've drafted.
Okay.
I don't think that answers his question.
I guess it really doesn't matter.
So the part that's already non-conforming would still be non-conforming, but it would not be considered, because we also use language more non-conforming, or expanding a non-conformity. So by taking the extra sliver that or portion that was taken by the city would not increase that non-conformity, but that non-conformity would still exist if it existed in the first place, if that makes sense.
Did you say that to start with, the non-conformity? I mean, did I miss that? Because entirely possible, I did.
Did I say the word non-conformity? I'm not sure.
When you were talking about the new regulation, did you say that?
I think, okay, I'm not.
It doesn't matter. I don't mean to put you on the spot.
No, that's fine. I'm sorry if I'm not sure if I understand your question, but if I didn't, then I apologize. So this regulation is to prevent nonconformities that are caused by a taking from the city of Norwalk for the expansion of public roads and sidewalks.
Thank you. I understand.
Anything else?
It sounds to me like a win-win. Public benefit and property doesn't fall into any kind of nonconformity.
Hopefully, that's the hope.
We're all about expanding sidewalks.
Does
So-
the, oh, sorry, go ahead, Mike, my bad.
Go ahead.
Does the expansion of streets include like expansion for, say, bus lanes or bike lanes or other multimodal transportation? Like, is that covered as part of widening streets, or does that need to be said explicitly?
I think this regulation would cover that. We would, because we say streets or sidewalks, that would cover kind of bus lanes as well. I'm not sure what exactly is in the plans to the extent they're concrete yet, but we would argue that it is. Our office would surely argue that they are encompassed.
And Chapin, I would say, knowing TMP, they're active in expanding both of those. Well, not so much bus lanes yet, but the discussion of expanding for bike lanes is definitely. I mean, this Highland Avenue, for instance, is under renovation, but they're going to. They've made the road a little wider in some places so that they could get the bike lanes in. Oh, and sidewalks, like bike lanes and sidewalks.
That it? Anyone wish?
I'm ready to make a motion to,
But it's a public hearing, Mike.
Oh, sorry.
We're not ready yet.
Sorry, I forgot about.
That's okay. That's okay.
Trying to keep things moving here.
I appreciate that. Anything else from any of the other commission members? Okay, anything else, Attorney Sapienza?
Not at this time. Thank you.
Okay, then, Brian, you want to explain to the public how they can express their opinion?
Sure. So before I do that, do the same thing I did last time with some administrative stuff. So we referred it out to Westcog, who found it of just local significance for the city. We referred it to the Harbor Management Commission, who made a finding of consistency with the harbor management plan. And we referred it to Deep, who I'll pull that one up, but they found it consistent with the Coastal Management Act.
Okay. Thank you, Brian.
You're welcome. And with that, if anyone from the public would like to speak, you could use the raise your hand tool. It's at the bottom of your screen. If you're dialed in on a phone, you could hit *9. We got one person. We have Miss Cece.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can.
Hi, Diane CC, Olmsted Place. Good evening, everyone. First, because I know this is being recorded, I just want to say I would have spoken to the last item that was a public hearing, but I couldn't find any information on the city website. So just want to get that in there. On this item, just briefly, I want to say, of course, this is a good idea for all the right reasons that are in the documentation. I just wanted to get some clarification from the attorney, though, because, and Mr. Baker, maybe that when I was reading through this, everything speaks to any portions that are acquired by the city of Norwalk. And so I just wanted to understand, does this apply to the state-owned, like US 1 and the state routes within the city? And so how does that work with DOT? Because I suspect, I think someone just mentioned Highland even, which I think is 136. And I wanted to make sure when you say the city of Norwalk, that wasn't clear to me. So thank you for just answering the question. Thank you.
Matthew, I'm going to stop you. We listened to all the comments. After the public's finished, you'll have an opportunity to respond. Anything else, Ms. Cece?
No, that was it. Thank you. Again, I think it's a good idea. It protects the homeowners, and I think it's something that otherwise may have been overlooked. And I think it's important to get this right, especially since we all support the underlying thing of the expansion of the sidewalks and everything. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else, Brian?
If anyone else would like to speak, you could use the raise your hand tool now. Seeing none, Mr. Schulman.
Okay, Attorney Sapienza, I'll turn it back to you.
Sure. Just to address the question of whether this would apply to the state of Connecticut, as it's written, it would not. They're not included. The state of Connecticut is not included. Perhaps they could be added one day, but also the state of Connecticut has other means to handle their takings of property. If they're able to at any time come and speak with us about possibly adding them in here, but because we don't represent them, the state of Connecticut and only the city of Norwalk, as of now, this amendment is only tailored to the city of Norwalk.
Thank you. Any other questions for Attorney Sapienza? Okay, if not, we will close the public hearing and move on to action.
Now I'll make my motion.
Okay, Mike, go ahead. Brian, you want to bring up the language? Mike, you want to make your motion?
Oh, sorry, I was still muted. Yeah, I make the motion to accept the draft resolution to approve.
Okay, is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, Galen seconds. Any discussion? All right, if not, we'll go right to a vote. Let's do a roll call.
Sure. Miss Jordan Byron,
Yes.
Miss Tabashnik,
Yes.
Mr. Cantor,
Yep.
Miss Langalis,
Yes.
Miss Wells,
Yes,
Mr. Mushak,
Yes.
Mr. Bryce,
Yes.
Mr. Rowena,
Yes.
and Mr. Schulman.
Yes, but you've left out the little Tabachnik there. It passes
You
unanimously.
can have them meet.
They can be friends.
Okay. Continuing with our meeting. Attorney Sapienza, I believe you're going to discuss with us ex parte conversations.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. So ex parte conversations, I know that there's been some concern in once an application is received by your office, it's important to make sure because you decide as a communal body that all the material you're relying on has been able to be considered by the entire body. I know especially it comes in terms of appealing a decision, it would mostly come in as if it was material information that was heard outside the record ex parte by a commission member. It could also attribute to claims of bias or prejudice as well. So sometimes it can be difficult when an application covering an expansive scope of topics is presented. But I'd encourage the commission to try their best. I know there are commissioners have been called, not in the city of Norwalk, but in other towns as well, and perhaps in the city, but people have called commissioners directly. And I know it's an important balance to appease the members of the city of Norwalk, but also perform your job well. So sometimes that entails nicely telling people that you are interested in hearing their thoughts and considerations and comments, but encouraging them to do that during the formal sessions when you're meeting so that the entire public body can hear it. If a situation does arise where you're not sure or think you might have had an ex parte conversation regarding a pending application, I think the best thing to do would be to either an email to the whole commission or at the next meeting when that application comes up on the agenda to to make a record of it, the content of the discussion in that it was had. Most of the times, ex parte discussions, if they're by accident or very quick, they're not going to materially affect the application. It's not really a technicality rule for a site plan or special permit or an actual administrative action. They're a little more important. For a legislative action like a text amendment, they're still important, but again, because you have the commission has broad discretion in their legislative actions and considered and provided deference by the court, it's going to be harder for an applicant to show that the discussion, material effect, the ex parte comment or something material affected your decision. But in an abundance of caution, it's better to share it with the committee so that everyone's aware of it.
Matt, what about where we currently find ourselves? And that is in the middle of the process of approving entirely new zoning regulations. To what extent, if any, can members of the commission discuss this publicly or with friends or people who accost them on the street?
That's a very good question. And I did look, I didn't find much case law. Complete revisions of zoning regulations aren't too common, and there hasn't been a lot of case law involving them. But it seems like the fundamental rule would still apply And that you know, I think that the concern here is the breadth of the zoning topics that are covered by the rewrite, which is more than just a single application. And I you know, appreciate that difficulty. And I don't think there's a great answer other than that is a side effect of doing a complete zoning rewrite. And so it may be tougher to have those conversations while the application is pending, and you know, through the decision. And if you do have such a conversation regarding the contents of the rewrite, again, in an abundance of caution, I'd say report it to the rest of the commission. But I don't think I think the fundamental rule still applies, whether you're doing one regulation or several regulations.
I have at least two questions. Should be my middle name. So my first question is the training. Here, come on. The training that we went to on this was that ex parte communication becomes an issue once the hearing is opened, not once the application is in. I understand why it might make good sense to like choose the starting of the application point, but that the issue is about hearing evidence that could influence your decision making outside of the public hearing, giving the respondent the opportunity to respond and making sure that the rest of the commission is hearing the same evidence as you. Do you know why you guys, sort of by practice at least, or maybe I'm totally wrong, from what I'm reading here, look at it from the beginning of the application?
And I'd have to take a look at the training if you ever want to send me a copy of the training you're talking. I mean, I'm interested in that page, but I think the point of it is that the ex parte communication is that you'd be relying on information that whether the applicant themselves or the public wouldn't be able to address at the public hearing because they don't know it exists. So whether that information occurs during the public hearing session itself, or before that, I don't think affects the purpose of the rule. If you were to have an ex parte conversation as soon as the application is received about a substantial matter involving the ex parte conversation, that's information that you're using to decide the application that no one else knows about. So that's why I think I'd be interested to see that reference. But I think in an abundance of caution, in my understanding of the law, it would take place from when the application is received.
Okay, thank you. And I can absolutely send this to you. My other question, so
I'm sorry, Anna, if I may,
sure.
just before you ask your second question, Taisha Toms wanted to say something. She had her hand up.
Yeah, I didn't need to interrupt. I could wait until she was finished.
Oh, okay. Go ahead, Anna.
Oh, okay. The other question was I hear things all the time, you know, because I'm on Facebook. I mean, even if I don't type anything, I read things. I have eyes, right? And I have neighbors and text change. So I'm hearing things all the time. Since I went to this training, the practice that I sort of put in place was that if I hear anything that's, you know, could be fact based, as opposed to just like, why are you all doing this? I write it down. I have a list. I send it in to Steve, or I bring it up, you know, at the hearing on my list so that everybody can hear it and try to get an answer to that question. So then my corollary to that is I sometimes have direct communications with Steve or Brian and Steve with questions that I have about a project, and they provide really, really great answers. But, you know, that also is not necessarily shared with the whole commission. My practice has been to also sort of restate, in a sense, some of our conversation in a public forum, you know, when we're talking about the application. Is that okay? Is that, because wouldn't, I guess maybe my question is, does it also count if it's communication with staff that the rest of the commission isn't hearing because it's a one-to-one?
I think I'd be hesitant to answer that too directly in the general.
Okay.
You know, if you have a comment, but I think if it's substantive, it should probably go to everybody. I mean, everyone should be aware, the public and the applicant should have a chance to respond to it if it's something that's going to be affecting your decision. I could say if it's possibly very small, I could see, but I'd almost be curious if you have one of those specific instances, feel free to reach out and we can
Sure.
the law department can give a more tailored opinion. But in general, the rule is that if it's something that you're going to be relying on for your decision, it should be part of the record.
Okay, thank you.
Please go ahead.
Thank you. I was actually here for the last item, but I stayed for this because I'm interested in the conversation. And I just wanted to comment on the recommendation that you send an email with regards to anything that you hear. I would actually recommend against that. I would not send an email to the entire body discussing anything of substance, because that would constitute a violation of FOI. So I just wanted to throw that out. You can speak to agenda items in an email, but as far as content or substantive information that goes into your decisions, I would avoid making those comments or sharing them via email.
So you're saying we should put them into the record like during a commission meeting or during the public hearing instead?
Yeah, not in an email. You can send the email to less than one, less than a quorum. The issue email becomes if someone replies on, then there's a discussion, right? Then
Yeah, then it becomes a meeting or discoverable.
Avoid doing that.
Go ahead, Galen.
I have a question. If like three of us all got together, like there are new people coming on the commission, got together just to say, like two commissioners and a new person, to say, welcome, I'm so glad you're here. Is that then noticeable? Would that be an FOI problem?
Without,
Go ahead, Matt.
Or Matt?
Sure.
Or whoever?
Yep, and Taisha, feel free to chime in as well. Please do. But without the language in front of me, the language of the statute is that the meeting has to occur with a sufficient number of people, and it has to be about the application as well. So just the fact that multiple people, multiple commissioners are in the same room does not necessarily constitute a meeting if you're talking about the New York Yankees. But if you're talking about a zoning matter that's a pending application, then you're getting closer to a meeting status. So pleasantries, hi, hello, would not constitute a meeting under FOIA.
Okay, and like if you meet at a party, like the mayor's ball, for instance, so, several commissioners were there, we all said hello to each other, it was.
Social events
social event.
exempted from FOI. There's an actual exclusion for social events. Unless at the mayor's ball, you decided to discuss an application, which I hope you did not.
Can you talk about concepts?
Violation.
Yeah,
Like-
it's a good question, Nick.
Could you talk about concepts versus specifics? Like, that's the thing I'm getting a little hung up on. I totally get the, 1, 2, 3 Main Street is coming up. We don't want to talk about that specifically. Get that, that's on the board. But there's general concepts with zoning and planning that I think sometimes useful to just like bounce off of ideas of people and get people's perspectives. That isn't necessary in the public hearing that people, may not want to come to something like this and share. Like where does that line live? I know you can answer, I guess, in the specifics of 2 or 3 zoning commissioners getting together and just chatting, and then, other non-zoning commissioner conversations.
And I think that the item there would be what's pending before you. So again, are any of those concepts really applicable to an application that you have pending before you? If they're not relevant, I think you're in more clear territory. That the more you start having trouble answering that question, then the more I think you should exercise caution.
But I guess what you're saying, though, is what you're advising is the zoning rewrite is now you're holding effectively as open, and therefore any zoning concept is effectively at like fair game, or you'd advise not having those conversations.
Again, once the pending application, yep, the application.
No, but sorry, I mean like right now, like today, like it's not, we have not had one public hearing yet. We're gonna have these like public hearings, probably like the official public hearings won't be to the fall.
Right.
And what I'm trying to gauge is what do I do between now and the fall? I get when the real public hearings start.
And it's
game
also not an application.
Well, I don't, sure. I'm less
Actually,
worried about.
Nick, we have two
Yep.
public hearings on that coming up in June.
Yeah, but are you
So
considering
it's
that
sooner.
as, no, but are you considering that as it being open per se for the approval? I was holding them more as like preliminary, but maybe if we're saying we're holding those as like for real, then I guess then it's, you know, something we can't talk about.
Is
Yeah,
there, oh, sorry, go ahead.
no, go ahead, go ahead, please.
Is the rewrite considered an application, or does it fall more into the legislative side of things like you had talked about before, where we had more leeway to have conversations?
So application would involve, I mean, anything that comes before you is an application. So, and then once you take the applications, that could be divided into administrative applications, which are like site plans, special permits, you know, specific applications for does this comply with the regulations, versus a broader legislative application, which is like a text amendment or maybe a zone change. But the zone change could go either way a little bit, but if that
Yeah, I
answers.
guess, Matt, for like the zone, like the zoning regulation update, like that is it's a planning and zoning commission application. Like it's their proposal as opposed to like a private person coming in with but it's still an application at the end of the day.
Correct.
Thank you.
And it's
So
similar to
Tim-
the application that you heard earlier today about you know, the right of way, you know, the city acquiring property, except the only different that was kind of initiated by the city. Except the difference here is that the zoning commission is planning and zoning commission itself is proposing the rewrite, and it's much broader. And
So-
go ahead.
Sorry, so when we did the public hearing tonight, it wasn't like the Planning and Zoning Commission presented it, somebody spoke about it, and then they did a rebuttal. Did they do a rebuttal? Like the format, is that what it's gonna be like for the zoning rewrite?
Eventually, you'll have a public hearing for for the zoning rewrite, and you'll
Yeah.
have.
And
But
what we
that's
said
same
for
thing.
June meeting, what I think we said is Brian and Steve will answer in the meeting, more fast
Right.
acting versus waiting to the end, so it doesn't, you know.
Right, so
doesn't
it sounds
grow
like a
that way.
different.
Well, different
but then-
format, but the same concept, I think is
Same
the
concept.
essence here.
And to
I-
what Nick was saying, like, so if we hear stuff like in the next couple of months, we just have to bring it to the whole group so that everybody hears the same thing.
That would be ideal. It is, and I tried to think of, you know, I just don't see another way around. I mean, rewrites are not that common. And I think it's great, but one of the side effects is that it expands the topics that are covered by a pending application. So it may be tricky, but I'm not saying you need to sequester yourself like a jury, but it might be a little more diligent in terms of the zoning topics that you need to be careful of outside the record.
So planning and zoning is having, oh, sorry.
Sorry.
Anna.
I'm
Or
sorry.
Galen.
You go ahead. I already asked a question. I just have a question for Taisha about FOI.
Okay, well, I'm still pertaining to Matthew, what he's talking about. You know, we're having, the planning and zoning department is having all these public hearings. And some of us in our other capacities are going to be at those public hearings. And inevitably residents make comments, and they're going to make comments directly to us. And it seems what you're saying is almost like we can't even listen, or if whatever we hear from that person, we're supposed to bring it back and bring it to the public forum. We had a meeting in the 6th taxing district recently, and there were a lot of good comments made. And I said to people, write them down and send them to Brian and Steve. And that way, all the commissioners will hear your comments because Brian and Steve have to send everything that they receive, at least I believe they do, to the commission. So is that okay?
I think that's great advice to give to encourage people to channel things through Brian and Steve. To the extent that you do hear other comments, again, will those comments affect you, and will a appealing applicant be able to prove that what you heard off a stray comment on your way to Stop and Shop or wherever you may hear this discussion, whether will an applicant be able to prove that affected your decision on the application? It's a challenge, but that's why we want you to be cautious. But it depends kind of what you hear. You may hear, I don't like them, I do like them. And in abundance of caution, you should report back as much as you can. The more substantive of the off the record conversation you hear, I think the more important and more diligent you should be about relaying that back to the at a public meeting, if that makes sense. But I think it's a tough battle, but the best thing is to try to stay away from any off the record conversations regarding pending applications. And to the extent you can't, I mean, again, is every single word that you hear going to completely erase the zoning rewrite? No. I mean, the applicant would have to, or an appellant, someone appealing the rewrite would have to prove that piece of information. They'd have to have proof that you heard it and what you heard and how it affected you and how that was inappropriate for what you should be terminating the regulations. So it's a tall order, but
this is a public, I'm talking about public forums that planning and zoning is hosting. And I think it's actually great if we can go to other parts of the city and hear, what people have to say, because we kind of work in a vacuum here.
But Tammy, it sounds to me as if we should be avoiding those meetings if we can.
And if there's multiple of you there, you would constitute a meeting. If you have a quorum of members that are there, you could
Even
risk
if you're just
constituting.
listening? I'm sorry, even if you're just listening?
Yes.
Because I thought we were encouraged to attend them, and if we couldn't attend them, to watch the videos. And they're recorded so that we can all watch the videos, and so the constituents can see them. Some of the neighborhood association meetings weren't recorded because they were held at the neighborhood association room or whatever. But most of these meetings have been recorded and are getting published. And the guidance we got was that there was a 3-part test. Is the information evidentiary? Was it made after the hearing started and ended and before the decision or the application, as we discussed? Is it going to prejudice your vote? And do other people not know about it? And it says, whenever possible, direct the individual to come to the hearing, put it in evidence, which is like the same as email Steve, right? Or put it in the online form in the case of the zoning thing. Solutions get the information into the hearing either from the source or from the commissioner. I don't know. I think for us to stop going to these public meetings.
Well, I
I'd
don't
be
think
concerned by
are you
that.
saying, sorry, and I don't think he's saying the meetings are you saying stop going to the ones that P and Z are hosting?
Yeah, well, that's what.
No, I don't think that's what he's saying.
That's what Tammy and Matt.
No, I don't think.
Let's get it from the source.
Yeah, no, totally.
Not interpret what you think he said. Matt?
I'd have to say that's an interesting question, and I'd like to have more time to give you a more thorough opinion than on the spot. But I think there might be some concern that I'd like to look into myself.
Yeah, Matt, I'll send you an email so that you can kind of give an official response, and then we could provide that to the full commission. So essentially what we've been doing is, like Steve and myself have been hosting these meetings with whether they're neighborhood groups or taxing districts. And so the public can attend and ask questions on the reg rewrite. I mean, for this particular example, it's the commission's application at the end of the day. So it's, your decision is sort of your own based on all of the feedback that we get. So, I mean, all of this information that we've been getting is the idea is that it will get tabulated and circulated to the commission, and then staff will provide responses. And then so hopefully all of the comments that we've been receiving will eventually make their way to the commission for them to review.
That's very helpful, and I think I have a sense of where I'll land on this, but I just want to make sure I fully understand more information about those meetings you're talking, those sessions that you're talking about, and I just would like to. I think it's better if I come back with an opinion to be certain. I don't want to cause confusion. So
yeah, absolutely.
I have one additional question. If we could, are we done with this? Hello?
If it looks as if we are, Galen.
Well,
Okay, sorry. It's like it froze. I wasn't sure.
Yeah, I have one more question.
All right, go ahead, Mike.
Can I ask my question quickly?
Sure, but you said, are we done with this? So I didn't know if you were moving on to another subject.
I don't know if I am or not. What
Okay.
I want to know is if, is it so many commissioners? Is it a quorum that constitutes a meeting that needs to be noticed? So it has to be a quorum. It can't be, it isn't like 2 commissioners or 3 commissioners. It's a quorum of the commission, right?
Quorum, except if you are deciding things that you have. If you can make a final decision on something and you have decision-making authority in that moment, which I don't think that would apply ever here. If that was the case, then because there are certain instances where a quorum is not necessary to constitute a meeting. So I don't want to give you a blanket yes, that it has to be a quorum. In most instances, yes, it does. But there are those times where 2 people together, because they were giving the authority perhaps by the larger body to come to a conclusion, then that would be considered a meeting, right? Even if it's not a quorum. If, like, for instance, if Common Council delegated the decision-making authority on a particular matter to 2 people, and those 2 people met and they came to a conclusion, that would be considered a meeting, even though it's not a quorum.
I see. Thank you.
Go ahead, Mike.
Sorry, Mike.
Oh, no, that's all right. My question was, what if you know there will be a pending application, but there is no pending application, and you're asked to meet with someone to have a discussion? It's happened to me a few times over the years, and I've always said no, deal with staff only. But if it just happens that you're talking to someone and then there's an application that, I mean, would ex parte work or apply if there is no application yet, but you know one might be coming?
Actually, I think this came up one time and theoretically, and again, I'm happy to get you a more precise answer, but I think I heard that my understanding is that there hasn't quite been a court case on that issue of when it clicks, but I think there, in an abundance of caution, there's advice that if you know a pending application is coming, there's no formal deadline of again, the application necessarily clicks it. If you're aware of a pending application, I think until there's court guidance, the recommendation is to take the cautious route. But my understanding is there hasn't been quite a case that specifically says one way or the other, but it's advised to be caution if you know an application will be pending shortly, because again, I think that the spirit of the rule is that, are you relying on information that not everybody has a chance to get? And if you know the application is coming to, it would be more prudent to be safer.
The guidance.
Thank you.
We use in that instance is how would another person or the opposition to a particular applicant feel if they overheard the conversation, right? Because you never know who's around the corner, who's in the next aisle at Stop and Shop, who's in the booth next to you in a restaurant. And if that person overhears a conversation that they will be able to challenge, then and they could find fault with, I would probably avoid those situations. Something that you wouldn't want another person, particularly the opposition, to overhear. And now I'm going to go because this was not my I'm co-opting Matt's section. So thank you all and have a great night.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Good
Thank you
night.
for your comments.
Thank you, Taisha.
I have a separate and hopefully short question, if that's all right.
Sure.
So with the rewrite, when interacting with folks, is it appropriate for us to direct them to the website to get them engaged? So that's kind of like question one, and question two is around, if we know something factual from what's proposed in the draft or from the map, is it appropriate for us to share that with them directly, or do we need to direct them to the website and not provide any comment?
I'm not sure what you mean by factual. I mean, just the existence of them. Again, the safer route is to direct them to the website. Again, a lot of this depends on if someone is going to appeal based on what you're doing. That's way down the line. So, if you do it once, it doesn't mean that everything's for naught. No, but yes, the safer, because there might be some difference of opinion on what you determined to be a factual piece of information versus a subjective piece. The safer approach would be to limit your, again, off the record conversations as much as possible, and kindly direct people to the website and to the public meetings is the safest approach. I know I wish I could give everyone a very clear, bright line rule, but unfortunately in my profession, that's very rarely the case, especially when you're something involved as not as common as a complete rewrite. So I just want to encourage caution, but I also don't want everyone to be overly worried. Again, the spirit is, are you substantively discussing something that again, if someone was really almost like Taisha said, opposing a regulation, want to know and want to. So I don't want you to lose sleep over technical, pleasantries or just merely mentioning the word zoning. But it's just to be thoughtful that, everything you're doing is open to everyone who may be interested on the public record.
Matthew, if you have examples like one, is this an example of what you should do or what you shouldn't do? And you want to email those to us so we can read them, that might be helpful. If the city has an example, and you can take out the names, but say, this is an example of somebody that found themselves in hot water, and this is fine,
Sure.
Send it to Brian and he can send it around.
Sure, and I'm thankful for this opportunity to kind of appreciate your concerns and questions more, and I'm happy I will definitely look into trying to provide you more specific guidance on that law. And I think that's always easier to do, at least in my job in writing, because sometimes it's just describing a case, and that it's harder to do verbally versus in writing. I could give a better synopsis. So I will definitely try to aid you as much as possible in that regard.
Great.
Thank you. Okay, thank you very much for your assistance tonight.
My pleasure. Anytime. Thank you.
Next item, approval of the minutes of the May 3rd meeting. Can I have a motion?
I have a question. I was looking at the meeting that's dated April the 7th,
Yeah,
and it has me in attendance, and I was not here in the country.
that was April 7th.
Yeah, I was looking at the minutes, just kind of like just reading them, so this way I could say, yes, I approve. But it says April the 7th, and I wasn't here. I wasn't in the country April the 7th, but it has me on roll call.
JJ, can we take that as a motion to remove your name from those present at the meeting of April 7th?
But that meeting was on a Friday. You guys had a meeting on a Friday?
No.
They've got the wrong date on the minutes, probably.
Well, if it's a wrong
Well, the
date
minutes of
on
May
the
3rd we're
minute,
talking about, right?
then it may or may not, no, then it may or may not be a meeting you attended.
Okay. So
All right,
remove my name from there.
Brian, will you have someone look into that? And if it's necessary at the next meeting, we'll amend the minutes of whatever that meeting was.
Will do.
Okay,
April 7th was a Friday.
That's it.
thank you for bringing that up, JJ.
Were
You're
the
welcome.
meetings sent around, or sorry, were the minutes sent around? I don't think I got a copy of them.
Yeah.
I've seen the minutes as.
Yeah,
there
they
are-
were, they were part of the attachment from Steve Kleppen.
Right.
All right, I'm sorry I missed them. I'm having trouble finding them.
That's okay, Chapin. Let's see if we have enough people to approve them.
Okay.
Unless you want us to hold off so that you can participate in the discussion at our next meeting.
If I do find an error when I see it, can I re-raise it at the next meeting or no? Is it
Yeah, I
already
believe,
closed?
yes, no, you can.
Okay.
Then can I have a motion to approve the meeting minutes of May 3rd? Please.
I'll make the motion.
Okay, Tammy makes the motion, Anna seconds. Raise of hands, all those in favor? Okay, any opposed? Any abstentions?
Right,
We've
I
got
wasn't here.
three abstentions, JJ, Chapin and Richard. And if necessary, we'll revisit those.
Thank you.
Brian, any comments in Steve's absence?
Nothing from me.
Okay. Comments of commissioners? It's late. I'm going to keep my mouth shut.
Right, me too.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Second.
Okay, so Nick moved, JJ seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Looks like it's unanimous. We get together again on June 7th.
Okay, thank you. Good night,
Good night.
everybody.
See you then.
See you all then.
Thank you.